it must begin.
What you think that you think that you think that we think is cool. You think that you think that you think that what you think you think
But it's clear that it must begin.
Hey there, folks. We're going to get started here in about 1 minute. I will see you soon.
what you think that you think that you think that we think is cool. You think that you think that you think that what
But it's clear that it must begin.
Alrighty. Hello, everyone. I hope you all are doing well. Happy Sunday, everyone. And it is indeed a sunny day outside, at least where I live. I don't know about you, but yes, it is a beautiful day outside. So I hope, hey, Frenetic, welcome. So yes, I hope everybody is having a great weekend so far. Like I said, beautiful weather, beautiful weekend. I spent some time outside yesterday, pulling weeds in my garden. I don't have a huge backyard, but it's big enough that it has weeds, so they got to be pulled. So I did some of that yesterday. That was fun. But yeah, I hope everyone else had a relaxing weekend. I did some yoga this morning. It was great. Did some Pilates yesterday. Also great. Peak. I love that peak. They say I've heard good things about this outside. Yes, occasionally we all unfortunately must go and touch grass, and in my case, sometimes literally. It's a tough job, but somebody's got to do it. Basically, my dog just, begs me to go outside, and then we go outside and play for a while. But yeah, it is important, and real talk, it is important if you do have the ability to go outside sometimes. It can be hard sometimes when we're, learning a new skill or trying to make a name for ourselves or going job hunting, or whatever it is you're doing. It can be very tempting to just sort of keep at the grind and stay inside and stay in front, especially stay in front of your computer, or especially these days to doom scroll on your phone. You pull up X or Blue Sky or, New York Times or whatever news site you follow, and you start just doom scrolling on your phone for hours. And what you got to do is occasionally just break out of that cycle. Just break out of that cycle, go outside, sit in the sun for a minute without your phone, and maybe you could read a book if you want, but no digital device. Just sit outside for a minute and just be in the present moment. That will be very helpful for your mental state in general. Hey, it wasn't Mike. Welcome to the stream. Good to have you here. Yeah, and I'll freely admit, so, last weekend it was Easter Sunday, so I didn't have a stream, but, I woke up and, like, I just wasn't feeling great. Like, just mentally. I was not in a super good spot. I was, nothing catastrophic. I was just kind of sad. And sometimes it's okay to feel sad. But what I did was, I was tempted to just kind of sit in bed and play video games or whatever. And what I did instead was I went to the garden supply store and I bought a bunch of mulch and I just did a bunch of like spread a bunch of mulch around in my yard, and that was fun, and I felt a lot better after I did it because it was something physical and it was something outside, and my dog had a good time too. So sometimes you just gotta get outside, get some vitamin D from the sun, and you'll feel better. Yeah. Hey, Frenetic, they say, quick question regarding Supabase. So, for those of you who might not know, Supabase is basically a cloud based tool for hosting SQL databases, so relational databases. They say, I set up a Supabase database and populated it. I didn't touch it for a week and I got an email saying it was going to be archived due to inactivity. Have you had that before? How will you deal with this in the Find a Grave app? Yeah, that's a great question. So, probably the one thing I dislike about Supabase is that basically it's if there are no hits to your database in a week, in 7 days, then it will be paused. So all the data is still there. It's not going to be, the data doesn't go away, nothing like that. But if nobody accesses the data within a 7 day period, then it gets put on pause and you have to log into your dashboard. So you could just log back into Supabase and click unpause. Or before it gets paused, you can essentially just make a ping to it, like use your app and make a hit to the database, make a query against the database, whatever, just some interaction with it, and that will reset that timer. So that's one thing you can do. But yeah, that's probably the one thing I dislike about Supabase, and I will say that is a limitation with the Find a Grave app right now, is that it has that 7 day timer on it. So usually what I do is right now I'll just every 3 days I'll just open up the app and I'll just do a few hits. Like I'll do a few pings in the app, just regular, basically just use the app and prevent it from, going on pause. Now, it is on my list of things to do to essentially put in like a time-based element to the app that will just do an automatic hit to the database every few days, like once a day. Just make a query and discard the results, but essentially just hit Supabase once a day and stop it from going on pause, because that is what you get with the free tier. Since it's the free tier, they don't want to waste bandwidth on inactive projects or hobby projects that aren't being updated, and so that's why that timer is in place. I hope that helps. Does that answer your question, Frenetic? But yeah, that's like the one thing I dislike about Supabase is they've got that annoying, timeout on your projects. But it's pretty easy to get around it, fortunately. And for me, with the Find a Grave app that I built, it's, even though it is in active use, but it's not. It doesn't have. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I'm going to do, Frenetic. Um, that's exactly like even though the app is in active use, it doesn't have enough volume to warrant me actually paying for the paid tier of Supabase. So yep, yeah, just gonna end up right to a temp table. Exactly. I'm gonna do something like that too. I just haven't had time to actually implement that feature yet, so I'm doing it by hand. I just have a little reminder on my work calendar, be like, open app, and do a couple searches, and that fixes it for now. Yeah. Okay, well, it has been a hot minute since we've seen each other, everybody. So, real quick, I just want to kind of refresh what we covered a couple weeks ago in this Laravel series. Essentially, what we covered a couple weeks ago was the importance of MVC structure and models. So, we have some data about like jobs. So, you can kind of see here on the right, we've got some data about jobs, just 3 of them right now, but obviously in a real application, you probably have dozens or hundreds or thousands. And with this data, right now it's kind of just stored in arrays. And originally it was just stored directly like in the function that was serving the data into the view. But of course, that's not what we want to have in a production environment. As kind of a intermediate step, we went ahead and put that data into a class. And what that allows us to do is essentially both set up the data and set up a series of methods that could also be called from this class. So methods, as we know from JavaScript, those are essentially like built-in functions within a particular class, and we can call those functions from the class. And the nice thing about classes is that if you define a class, you can also define custom methods that exist within that class. So in this case, we just kind of have all the data listed out, and then we have a method down here that's called find. And what find does is it essentially just takes in an ID that's an integer, so 1, 2, or 3 in this case, and then it says, all right, we've declared this variable job, and then just essentially find the first value that matches the value that's passed in. So find the first ID value that matches the value that was passed in. So look inside the array, look inside this array, and look to see if we pass in 1, find the ID with a value of 1, and return all the data for this particular job and serve it up to the view. And that's what that does. So the other thing we did down here is we added some error handling too. So if the ID doesn't exist, like if we pass in ID 1000 for whatever reason, which shouldn't be possible, but you know, users are gonna find a way to break stuff, right? If we pass in an ID that should be possible, then we can go to a nice fancy 404 page. However, I do want to start the stream today with a little troubleshooting exercise. And I really like this because it's pretty organic, because if you followed the course as written, you too would have encountered this error. So I encountered this error, I fixed it, but then I went back and I unfixed it because I wanted to fix it together with you here on stream, because I think it's a really good exercise in troubleshooting. So as we know, troubleshooting is a very important part of being a professional developer. Or even if you're just a hobby coder, learning how to troubleshoot effectively, not getting thrown off by error messages is extremely important and helps you get to the root of problems much quicker if you can effectively troubleshoot. So we're going to do that in a minute. A couple housekeeping things before we jump in. I do want to thank a few folks who followed me here recently. Imaginative Reflector, BDMAS, Rhesus Pravis, Ferris Alfarzi, Hashims, Samazon, Based Souza, Habibus Man, Pirate Steve. Ooh, that's a great one. I love that name. Vilmondus. Thank you so much for the follows, folks. Those are just folks that have followed in the last day or so. So thank you so much. Glad to have you here. And then another thing to mention is my closed captioner is working again. So hooray, I've got that up and running. If you want or need closed captions for this stream, if you want text of what I'm saying to appear on the screen, hover your mouse over the right side of the window and click the closed caption icon. Another thing, I have changed my handle on Blue Sky. So if you want to keep up with me, like on what my stream topics are going to be or any schedule changes for my stream, please do follow me on Blue Sky. But that handle has changed. Instead of mindwolf at mindwolf.bsky.social, it's now just at mindwolf.com. So if you search Mayan Wolf on Blue Sky, you'll find me either way. But if you have an old hyperlink or something like that with my old handle, it might not work anymore. But yeah, my new handle is simpler. It's just on Blue Sky. It's just at mayanwolf.com because I have a custom domain. I highly suggest you get a custom domain too. Yeah, get a custom domain with your name in it, and then you can make that into your handle on Blue Sky. So do that. But yeah, so that's my new handle on Blue Sky. My goal with doing that is that I would eventually like to get verified on Blue Sky. I'm sure as hell not going to get verified on X. I'm not giving them a single cent of my money. But if I can get verified for free on Blue Sky, that would be awesome. And getting my custom domain handle is the first way to do that. So yeah, check that out on Blue Sky. And then the last thing I'm going to mention is that this is probably going to be the last video in this Laravel series. Now, I know there's a lot more to the course, and if you're interested in this, I highly recommend that you do this course, but this is probably the last time I'm going to talk through it on stream. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not going to finish the course. I'm actually pretty far along. I'm toward the end of it here. And, like I always say, if you start something, if you start a course, you should finish it. And I fully intend to do that. But I'm probably not going to do so on stream just because I'm already very far ahead of where we're at on stream. And my schedule for basically the remainder of the summer, my stream schedule is going to be very sporadic. I have a lot of things coming up. I'm having a lot of travel. I'm leaving the country for several weeks. I'm doing things with my family. Several weekends coming up, so my stream schedule is going to be pretty off and on. And if I just stuck to it here on the stream, I would never finish the course because it would be forever, and that's not fair for you guys to make you have to wait. Um, so I think that's probably the last time I'm going to cover this material on stream, but never fear when I get back, I am still going to be streaming. I'm going to be streaming like couple, maybe one more time. Let's see. Well, we're going into May now. So like I'm thinking I'm going to be have two streams in May, and then in June maybe two, maybe only one. And then July should be pretty normal, four streams, and then August maybe two. Um, just again because I will be anywhere and everywhere throughout those months, traveling around and doing stuff. Um, so just to let you guys know, if don't get confused if you're like, where's the rest? Well, it's because it doesn't exist because just the scheduling isn't going to work out. Peak and Flow says, since you're so far ahead, I'm curious what you like best about Laravel, if anything. Yeah, like I always say, with any tool or platform, it wouldn't exist if it didn't have its advantages, right? That's the whole reason, specific things exist is the whole reason they can compete in the market and why people start using them is because they have advantages for a particular application. And some of the things I like about Laravel, it's very geared specifically towards building full stack applications. Like it is everything about this framework is it knows what it does. It's like I build full stack applications. I want to help you build your front end. I want to help you build your back end. I want to help you build your middle. And so it's got a crap ton of built-in functions and tools and like what we're going to cover today, which is specifically to help you set up databases quickly and efficiently, like as fast as possible. And so it's got all these just really out of the box type built-in tools that help you spin up an application super quick versus with something like trying to build a full stack application with say React or another framework like a JavaScript based framework. Yes, also very good. Yes, also does some of the same things, but doesn't necessarily have that full stack integration that Laravel does, where it's going to go all the way from the front end of the front end to the back of the back end for you and help you with that. And we're going to see some of that today in terms of the help with the back end. So you don't have to know SQL, you don't have to know Mongo, you don't have to know anything. Just you can do it all within Laravel. So I think that's useful. I think that's nice. Obviously I know SQL already, so for me, if I'm gonna in a pinch, I'm probably prefer to use SQL. But if you're not, a SQL developer like me, you might find it faster to use the built-in ORM tools that Laravel provides to help spin up your database. Hope that helps answer your question. Frenetic says, since streams are going to be sporadic, what sort of topics are you likely to cover? Yeah, we're probably going to do more like one shots. So by that I mean, when I do stream, my plan is we're gonna hit it hard. We're gonna do a full project in a stream, so start to finish. Hopefully they're going to be longer streams to give you more bang for your buck when I am on, and we're gonna do like we're going to build a project, whether it's a website or an app or whatever. We're going to build something literally from start to finish, no part one, part two. It's going to kind of be more of what I used to do, which is, longer form streams with a dedicated project that we're going to get done in one sitting versus, a series. And that's the purpose of that is really going to be just to give you something to kind of hold you over in between streams, right? So you can just, maybe you won't even follow along with me during the stream. I might, go too fast or whatever, but then you can go back and watch it later and end up with a full project and iterate on it and build your own thing, in the times when I'm not streaming. But yeah, in terms of, we're probably gonna do full stack stuff, probably going back to like JavaScript projects, with either a Mongo backend or a SQL backend and some kind of full stack app. Wasn't Mike says, basically Laravel is complete, no need for something else. Yeah, essentially. Mm-hmm. Plastic World says, can we backseat you backending? 100%. Yes, that's what we're going to be doing today. You're going to learn a little bit about Eloquent, which is Laravel's essentially Laravel's tool for quickly spinning up databases with NoSQL. You're already hyped? That's awesome. I'm glad you're excited. Hey, Bambina, welcome to the stream. They say, what does ORM stand for? Essentially, what ORM is it's like an interface. And I always forget what it stands for, but it's essentially like an interface between you and the storage medium for your data. So essentially, it's an interface between your code and the database. And a lot of times what that means is that you're writing something in JavaScript or you're writing something in PHP, but then when that compiles, it actually renders out to SQL. Yeah, object relational something. I know. I always forget what the M stands for, right? Object relational mapping. That's it. Thank you, Frenetic. Yeah, it's object relational mapping. And so essentially if we think about that, right? So object relational mapping, essentially taking the taking your data and or taking your code and mapping it to a relational database structure. Yeah. So you'll write in something like what we're going to do today. We're going to be writing in PHP, Laravel PHP, but under the hood, it's going to render out to SQL. But oftentimes it's going to be in a language that's a little bit more digestible, or you can use, keywords or shorthand or shortcuts to perform multiple actions in SQL. So things that would take multiple lines of SQL, you can do with a couple keywords. Now, whether or not that's faster for you depends on how well you know SQL. A lot of the times, SQL developers prefer not to use ORMs just because we like to be down, more toward the root of where the data is. But if you don't really care about that, if you're not interacting with your database regularly, if you just want to have a place to store your data, then ORMs can be very helpful. I'm not against them. It just depends on your interest. Yeah. Alrighty, folks. Let's go ahead and get started. Looks like we got folks trickling in here. So first off, we're going to do our little troubleshooting exercise. So as a reminder, last week what we did is we set up a class called job. We kind of put our job data in this array. Then we set up a method that essentially says, hey, take an ID, and the method's called find. Take an ID that gets passed in, and then find in this array, get the job data for the job that matches the ID that was passed in. So if we pass in ID 2, it should return this data here. And then once that happens, let's see. Once that happens, so what this route here is essentially saying, okay, we're passing in a job with a particular ID, and then we're going to call our job class and the find method. So that method we just went through, we're going to call that. We're going to store it in this variable called job, and then we're going to return our job view and pass in that ID and display it. So fairly straightforward. Essentially, all we're doing is the user clicks on something, and we'll go back to the job page here. So essentially, the intent is that the user clicks on one of these jobs, which will then, for this one, it'll pass ID of 1. So pass the ID of 1 into this route. And then this route is going to call our job class and the find method, retrieve that particular ID from the array, and then return the job view with that particular ID, which then is going to give more details about the job, and it's going to be a dedicated page for that job. Now, let's watch what happens when I click on one of these jobs. Uh-oh, we get an error. But another thing I do like about Laravel is how descriptive the error messages are. So that's another thing I do like. It says app/model/job find return value must be of type array, none returned. And it's saying that there's a problem in our job file, in our job model, so our job class. And then it's saying, it's kind of highlighting just kind of an arbitrary line here. There's really nothing wrong with this line. But it's saying return value must be of type array, none returned. So let's go ahead and go back to our job.php class here. So there's something wrong with this class. Can anybody spot? And actually, I should say there's something wrong with this method. So it's telling us that the problem is in the find method. Return value must be of type array, none returned. Can anybody spot what is wrong with this method? Hey, Mashiko. Can anybody spot the problem? Frenetic says find just returns a single item. That's actually correct. These are these are going to be like individual items, and so that's fine. Like what's expected is that a single item of this array gets returned. Plastic World says Copilot isn't on. Well, that's actually why we're doing this exercise, because sometimes we can forget how to troubleshoot if we don't have something like Copilot helping us or whatever. So I'm curious if anybody can spot what is wrong use the troubleshooting message. So the troubleshooting message is telling us what's wrong. The troubleshooting message is telling us what's wrong, and it's concealed. It's telling us it's in the find method. Ben tries to code. I love your username, Ben. That's awesome. They say, should you find text instead of int? Int is okay, because so essentially what we're doing here is we're just defining the type of value that's going to be passed in. So we are actually going to be getting an array. We are going to be getting an integer value being passed in here. So that's fine. Good guess though. Frenetic says, but you need to make it an array containing a single item. I will say that that is not the problem in this particular case. So let's revisit this message here. So it's telling us the problem is in the find method. It says return value must be of type array. What is it telling us here? The part that I have highlighted. What is it telling us here? Just the part highlighted. Yeah. It's telling us the return value must be of type array, but nothing was returned. Not just no array returned. So to be clear, it's not telling us that just no array was returned. It's telling us that this method returns nothing. Yeah. So now we're getting it, right? The fact that the problem is that there is no return statement in this method whatsoever. Nothing is being returned because there's no return statement. So all we need to do to fix this is essentially just say return job. And don't forget your semicolon, because PHP cares about semicolons. So now we'll save this, and then we'll go back and we'll try again. Yeah, there we go. So now it works, and it takes us to the dedicated job page. You can see that the route we're going to here is jobs/1. And we'll try the second one. That one works too. Yeah. So essentially the problem there was, it was a pretty simple problem, right? But with having the more complexity, you add to your application, the harder it can be to troubleshoot where the problem actually is. And so when I was looking at this earlier, I'll tell you kind of what I did to figure out where the problem lay. I first looked in the route. So wherever that is. Okay, in here. Yeah. So I looked in the route and I said, okay, are we getting when I click on one of these links here, is the right value being passed into the route? So I did a console log, essentially. I commented out this stuff. That's why this is here, because I was troubleshooting. So I just said, all right, just console log whatever value is getting passed in here. So if you click on this now, yeah, it's just going to console log a value of 1, right? Just going to console log a value of 1. It's going to just log it as a string, even though it's actually an integer. And, if we pass in 2, click on the second one, it's going to pass in 2, et cetera, et cetera. So that told me, okay, the right value is being passed in. So the problem then must be in the actual job class, just as the error message was telling me, right? The error message was telling me that it was in the job class was the problem. So I confirmed that, and then I went in there, and then I essentially, after that, I essentially saw, okay, the problem is, my data is fine. The problem must be in the find method, and then from there, it's missing a return statement. Yeah, so that's kind of how you can narrow stuff down. Console logging is always your friend. And but the most important, I would say, sort of tenet of troubleshooting is try to break the problem down into smaller chunks and get rid of the chunks that don't matter, right? Disregard the chunks that don't matter. Try to rule out as many of the chunks as you can, and then only drill down into the parts that actually might be causing the problem. So that's how you can troubleshoot efficiently. But yeah, so that was a fun little exercise. And the fun part is that was actually a mistake in the course. And I think he will actually cover it at the start of the next one. I don't remember. He might. But he'll say like, oh, sorry, I forgot, this return statement in the code. But I was firing it up for the stream today, and I was like, oh crap, it doesn't work. What's going on? DD is an interesting function name. Yeah, it stands for dump and die, which is also an interesting function name. Yeah, it stands for dump and die, which is essentially just deliver any of the data that's being passed in and then kill the function, or kill whatever whatever its parent whatever thing called it. Kill the app, or not kill the app, but kill the execution. Yeah. All right, so with that little troubleshooting exercise, let's go ahead and go into the new content for today, which is talking about database migrations in Laravel. Any last questions before we get started? Plastic says the etymology of some of these programming terms are actually wild. Yeah, no, I think my favorite is if you ever look into foobar, right? Exactly. If you ever look into the history of what is it called? Well, the history of emojis are really cool, but the history of Unicode. If you ever look into the history of like some specific Unicode characters and where they came from and why they exist, it's pretty fascinating because some of them really haven't had any relevance since like the days of punch cards, but they still exist in the Unicode alphabet, and some of them are pretty funny, like the difference between carriage return and carriage return line feed, which I'm sure you've seen, if you've ever translated between like a Linux and a Unix based system. If you've ever moved files between Unix and Linux, or if you've ever, dealt with GitHub, that type of thing, you've probably seen that in the command line. Those things that really don't, really don't matter in the modern day necessarily, but they are those legacy things that will always be present. And even the existence of the carriage return. Does anybody know where that came from? I'm curious. A little quiz for chat. I'm pushing you guys hard pretty early in the stream today, but does anybody know what carriage return actually refers to? Yeah. Yeah, actually, brand new. You nailed it. It refers to almost like a typewriter. Yeah, but it was actually a thing called a teletype. It was actually a thing called a teletype, which was like an automated typewriter. So before computers even had screens, they would print out their output on paper. So it would be an automated kind of a typewriter that would print out the output from the program or whatever, on reams of paper. And so the carriage return, the carriage refers to the print head that goes across the page and prints the data. So that thing that would go like across the page, and then when it reaches the end of the page and then starts over, that's what's called a carriage return. Now a carriage return is fine. It's just the carriage head going from one side of the page and then returning to the start. And then a carriage return line feed is when it also returns the print head, but then also goes down a line. So carriage return and carriage return line feed are essentially from the days of the teletype. Ben says, isn't carriage return equals backspace? Nope. It's actually when, like I mentioned, it's when it's essentially like a new line. It's actually kind of like a new line thing. Yeah. Peak says, I don't know if the story is true, but they say bugs are called bugs because when programming was done on punch cards, a squash bug on paper caused error. Yeah, that's one of those things I think that's maybe a little bit disputed in terms of what bugs actually refers to. I've actually heard of it. I've actually heard it referred to. They were called bugs because like literal bugs would get, back when computers were the size of a room and they used cathode ray tubes, and had miles of circuitry. That if a cockroach got in there and got fried, then that was that caused a problem, right? And so I think it's a little bit apocryphal about what that actually came from, but yeah, I think it's fun either way. Plastic World says because the pavements were uneven. What are you referring to there, Plastic, in terms of pavement? Thank you for the hydrate, Ben. Appreciate that. But yeah, I love as Plastic mentioned, the etymology of some of the programming terms are wild. There's a channel. Oh, Plastic says how they came up with the analogy of carriage. Actually, that's another fun one. I know way too much about this crap. It's so useless. So I believe, and you have to check me on this one, but I believe it actually not like a so carriage doesn't necessarily refer to like a horse and carriage. It more refers to I think it may refer to weaving. So like when a thing moves across and you thread through. Actually wait, no, that's a shuttle. That's not a carriage. But it has a similar meaning. But yeah, I think it has something to do with weaving. I have to look that up at some point because the first kind of like automated machines were actually automated looms. So some of the very first like industrial computers were actually automated looms that would weave textiles and blankets and things. And you could put a punch card pattern into that automated loom, and it would automatically weave the pattern for you. And so that was some of the first sort of industrial computing applications was punch card looms. But yeah, there's your useless computer facts for the day. Let's go ahead and get started with some actual content here before I lose all my viewers. But I love talking about it. It's fun. Alrighty, let's go ahead and get started. As always, I'm going to try to kind of equalize the volume. I hope it's still fine. But let me know, if his voice is too quiet or if my voice is too loud, and we'll try to kind of equalize the volume out a little bit. All right, let's get started.
All right, day 8. Welcome back, everybody. So in our job class, up until this point, we have been hard coding our job listings. And actually, on that note, if you're just building this for your company and at any given time, there will only be, 2 or 3 jobs available, and you don't mind manually updating this file whenever a change is made, then keep it simple. This is fine. There's nothing wrong with this whatsoever. However, yeah, if you're building an actual jobs board platform that allows people to sign up and create new jobs, then this doesn't make sense, right? Instead, we probably do need a dedicated database to house all of our job listings. And that's what we're going to work on today. Now, you'll remember when we initially installed this application, Laravel asked us which database we wanted to use. Let me show you that again. Laravel, new, testing. And it'll ask me a handful of questions, and then it will pull in all of the dependencies that Laravel requires through Composer. And then right after this, it's going to say, all right, cool, what database do you want to use? So notice by default, it chooses SQLite, which is a file-based database that actually kind of gets a bad rap sometimes. It turns out you can use this in, I would almost say, the majority of situations. If you're Google, you probably can't do it. If you're Amazon, you can't do it. But if you're just a reasonably sized business and you don't have database rows going into the millions and millions and millions, then you might be okay, at least initially. So that's why Laravel chooses it as a sensible default. But yeah, otherwise, if you prefer MySQL or MySQL, then you can select the one you want. So here's what I want to show you. I'm going to cancel out of here with Control C.
Okay, so just going to pause there real quick and talk about the different options that it shows. So, it shows MySQL, MariaDB, Postgres, SQLite, and SQL Server. So I've actually used all of these except for MariaDB at this point. Really, these are all just different flavors of relational database. And so most of you probably know already, but a relational database is essentially a table-based database. So it's the traditional type of database. It's the most widely used type of database on the planet. It's where you store your data in a series of tables made up of rows and columns, and you create relationships between those tables, which is why it's called a relational database. Also, all the rows and columns in the table are related to each other. So the different options here, I always say, a lot of people come to me and they're like, oh, which version of SQL should I learn? And my answer is going to be just pick one. And then once you know one version of SQL or one version of, a SQL database, you can pick up the others with no problem. Okay, that's good to know, Frenetic. Thank you. Yeah, so essentially the flavors here. So the first one, MySQL, that is an Oracle. It's an Oracle-owned database, type of database. Again, it's kind of like British English versus Australian English versus American English, right? We can all understand each other, but there's going to be differences in vocabulary, and that's kind of what you get from these. So MySQL, Postgres is an open source flavor of SQL. It's really, really great for building open source projects or building hobby projects. Supabase, so we were talking about Supabase at the start of the stream. Supabase runs on Postgres. SQL Server is Microsoft SQL, so a lot of corporate environments use SQL Server. SQLite, as he mentioned, is a file-based version of SQL, which we're going to be using for this project today. And then MariaDB, as Frenetic mentioned, MariaDB is just MySQL, but it's a fork that is not owned by Oracle. So kind of the open source version of MySQL. So doesn't really matter which one of these you learn. I would probably, if you're just starting out and you're building stuff on your own, I would recommend Postgres because you're going to find a lot of wonderful free tools that you can use right now where you can just build, host your database for free, tons of open source stuff that you can make use of. I would recommend Postgres. Peak says, I've been playing with Postgres, used to MySQL and digging Postgres. Yeah, Postgres is great. I like it a lot. I haven't ever used it in my professional career, but I use it for most of my hobby projects because it's so nice and open. Yeah. My current employer uses none of these. My current employer uses actually PLSQL, which is the big business version of Oracle SQL. So yet another version. There's a lot of them out there.
Because we don't need it. But if I switch back to PHP Storm and I go into my environment file, that database choice is determined here. So your .env file is where you configure all of the various preferences and passwords and strings for your project. So notice it includes such configuration of what database do I want to use? Is my application currently in a debug state? Well, if I'm working locally, the answer is yes. When I push it to production, the answer will be no or false. What else do we have here? What session driver do we want to use? What cache store do we want to use? If I'm connecting to some kind of API as part of my project, maybe there will be an API key that I store here, and I can add my own. So I could write some app API key, and then I paste in whatever string they provide me. And then I can reference that safely throughout my entire project without worrying about very sensitive codes or passwords or sequences being shared potentially through GitHub and things like that. So this is important, and we're going to talk about it more in the future. But for now, I just want to point your attention to the fact that if you want to figure out what your default database connection is, you can visit this file, or you can run an artisan command to view it. So let's go to the terminal. I will visit my example project that we're currently working on. And yeah, we touched on this just briefly. Laravel ships with a tool called Artisan. And when I run this, you'll see a variety of commands that you can run, a huge variety. But again, like everything, you're probably in most situations not going to run 90% of these. You'll find a handful that you reach for, and then every once in a while, you'll reach for a different one. Okay, However, if we come up, you'll see they are sorted according to a namespace. So we have an auth namespace, a cache namespace. You'll find a make namespace. This namespace is for creating or generating files. So if you want to quickly generate a class or an event or a factory or a job, and you'll learn all about this later in the course, you would use the make namespace. But yeah, if I scroll back up, notice within the DB namespace, there's a command called show. Display information about the given database. All right, so let's have a look at that now. PHP artisan DB show.
All right, let's go ahead and do that. Hey, Grizz, good to see you. They say, do you use a Sony headset? Yes, this is the headset I'm wearing. This is a Sony XM4 noise canceling headset. I really recommend it. I also had the XM3, so the previous model. Very, very good. Really like them a lot. They are expensive. They're not cheap. But you can get them on sale. Yeah, you can get them on sale. And it's nice because, you know, they are wireless normally, but the Bluetooth adapter on the computer I use to stream is broken. So I just plug in, I just plug in with I can hardwire it in as well. And so that's nice to have. And yeah, really excellent headset if you're looking for something that's noise canceling. I don't use the microphone for streaming, obviously. I use a dedicated microphone, but the microphone isn't bad. It's decent, but it's not as good as, something dedicated. So yeah, if you're looking for a good headset, I would recommend it. All right, so we're going to do PHP Artisan. Oh, I got a CD into my, CD example 3. And then we're going to do PHP Artisan DB :show. There we go. All right, so let's look at what we get here. Yeah, so it's telling us that, our database that we're using here is SQLite. It's telling us where the database lives, if there's a host name report or whatever. We don't have any of that. None of that is visible because we don't have a database set up yet. But then it's also telling us the schema and the tables. So by default, even though we, haven't really set anything up yet, it still has a default schema for us already. It's expecting that we're going to have a database for this project. Even though we haven't done anything to say that, the basic Laravel template gives us a skeleton of a database, and we're going to flesh this out. We're going to add stuff to it, and Laravel makes it very easy to do that. All right, let's keep going.
All right, and now we have a quick UI into our default database. I can see it uses SQLite. The path to that file is here. And then here are the various tables that are included at the moment. Now, here's a key thing to understand. When we initially ran that Laravel new command, one of the steps in that chain was to run your migrations and build up the database and corresponding tables. So I say that because if you're wondering, wait a minute, we're just learning about databases in this video, and yet all of these tables have already been created. How come? Well, that's why. Now, I also say this because if you created a Laravel app without using the Laravel new command, you will need to run this manually. And you can do that by saying PHP artisan migrate. And I'll show you an example of that. Let's go back to PHP Storm. And you'll remember from up here, the path to the database is right here. So we can check that. Go into database, database.sqlite. However, what if I delete this and then we start again? Okay, PHP artisan migrate. And let's put a pin in that word migrate just for now. We're going to talk about that more shortly. But if I run it, it's going to say, all right, you're using SQLite, fine, but I don't yet see a database. Do you want me to create it? Yes. So now it creates it, and it runs all of your migrations to build up the necessary tables that Laravel thinks you want, as well as the tables that the framework itself will require. Okay, so now if I
I can't click on the unmute button properly. So as I mentioned, this is one of the differences between a framework like Laravel in something like and versus something like Vite or another kind of app scaffolder. And I know that Laravel is using Vite here, but it's an example of how Laravel kind of helps you build a more complete application right out of the box. Because it's also going to even during that initial app setup process, when you just create a blank slate of a template of an app, it's also in the background building out a database for you, building out that structure. In the case of SQLite, which is a file-based type of database, it's even creating the database files and storing them in your application for you. So you've got some default tables there already, even if you didn't know it or need them yet. So kind of cool.
I switch back to PHP Storm, it manually creates that file. Now, your next question, of course, is, okay, cool, but how do I connect to the database? How do I see the tables? How do I inspect all of the rows within each table? And the answer is, of course, you got to connect to it in some way. You could do it directly through the command line if you're comfortable with that, or I would recommend using a dedicated GUI for your OS of choice. So here's what I recommend. So visit tableplus.com. At least at the time of this recording, it is far and away the best database management GUI I've ever come across. It's a free download, and there are versions for Mac, Windows, and Linux, so everyone should be happy and all on the same page. I'd highly recommend it. So give it a download and open it up when you're ready. Now, once you open it,
All right, so as you might have noticed, I have Table Plus open here. It is truly, as he mentioned, it is truly a very nice, lightweight way to connect to a local database. It is a nice tool. And it's you can see here, this is my database that I've been using for the training so far. We'll go ahead and create a new database, to follow along with this course. But yeah, Table Plus is good, and I would recommend it. It says I'm behind 8 updates. I might want to restart, I guess. But yeah, we'll just say remind me later. It's not going to matter. But yeah, so it's just a really little lightweight database manager. So pretty good.
you'll see a screen somewhat similar to this, maybe minus the Laracast connections. Let's create a new one at the top. And one cool thing about Table Plus is they support all of the various connections. So MySQL or Postgres or SQLite or even Redis. Everything will work. Let's click on this one here. And yeah, it wants us to know what's the name. We're going to call this our
Peak says, which tool do you use for your main SQL work? That's a great question. When you say main SQL work, are you talking like the stuff I do during the day as a SQL developer, or like my main hobby projects that I build, like in my off time? Because that's going to influence my answer. In the past, at work, it really depends on LOL both. Yeah. So for work, I've used a variety of tools. A lot of the times in a corporate environment, you're going to be using whatever tool matches the flavor of SQL you're using. So at a previous employer, when I used SQL Server, we used Microsoft SQL Server. So like the tool that Microsoft builds to interact with SQL Server, and using SQL Server language. And currently, at my work, we use PL SQL, which is an Oracle product. And there's a dedicated sort of there's a dedicated client called PL SQL Developer. They are not named creatively. I'll tell you that. There's a client called PL SQL Developer. I forget who the publisher is, but it is designed to work only with Oracle SQL, just like SQL Server, is designed to work with SQL Server SQL. So. Yeah, I use PL SQL Developer for my work, but that kind of client is going to be way too robust or way too complicated for if you're just building hobby projects with databases. So if I'm just doing hobby work, like if I just want to build out a database and host it and run some basic queries on it, I can do all of that within Supabase. So Supabase has its own little SQL client where you can just write SQL queries, raw SQL queries, and query your own database. And I like that just fine for interacting with Supabase's cloud database. But for local stuff, for like Postgres, you can install a Postgres client on your machine. They have one that you can download from the Postgres website, and that's fine. This one is, Table Plus is fine too. We're going to see here in a minute. It has its own SQL client as well, so you can interact with your SQL database, your local SQL database, using Table Plus also. And if you're interested in Supabase, I have done several streams where we use all the different features of Supabase, whether it's building tables or writing queries or handling security. Yeah, any full stack stream, like any stream where we build a full stack project and I am writing SQL, I'm going to be using Supabase as my host. So any of those streams you can check out and see how Supabase works. But Supabase is nice because you can use it whether or not you know SQL. So if you don't know SQL, that's fine. It has a GUI. You can interact with the GUI and do stuff that way. If you do know SQL, you can just bypass all of that and write your queries directly. So it's nice. Yeah, and yeah, there's other great tools out there. Yeah, the SQL Server Management Studio. If you're on Mac, so yeah, dbeaver. Yes, that's another great tool too. But for lightweight work, I would say you don't even need something as complicated as dbeaver. If you're cloud hosting, use Supabase. If you are, local hosting, you can use a tool like this, the Table Manager, or you can use, like if you're using Postgres, you can just use the Postgres client. So. Peak says, I would say I know SQL, my DBAs would disagree. Hey, yeah, you're never gonna know as much about a database as the DBA. So I think you're probably just fine. I got the fear of God in my very first job. I got the fear of God put in me by our DBA when I accidentally did a cross join query. So if you know SQL, you know that's bad. I did a cross join query against two huge tables, and I slowed down the database for literally everybody on the floor. And the DBA was this like Eastern European lady, and she stormed over to my cubicle when she figured out, she could see it was me running the query. I had no idea. And she stormed over to my cubicle and chewed me out. I was terrified and I never did it again. So yeah, DBAs are great. We love DBAs. They're terrifying. All right, let's keep going.
Example database. And next, it wants a path to that file. So we're going to give it a path directly here. Now, you can either manually select the file, or I will just do it inline.
Okay, I'm just going to catch up here. So we're going to go to SQLite. We're going to create. I'm going to call this one example 3 to just match the naming convention of my application. Example 3. We can give it a status color of, doesn't really matter. And then so we have to select our SQLite database file here. So we'll go up into example 3, and then we will find our database, which I'll look and see where he has it.
Users, Jeffrey Way, Herd, because we installed Herd in that directory. My project is called example database, and then the file is database.sq.
Okay, I'm going to assume mine is called the same, so we can go example. Let's see. So I'm in example 3 here, database, and then yep, here we go. It's database.SQLite, like so. So we say open. There we go, and it's found it.
Light. Okay, I'm going to give it a test to make sure that worked. Looks good. Let's give it a color of green.
Okay, so our connection is good. I'll give this a color of orange. I don't know. And then we can go ahead and save. Oh, I guess it made it. All right, well, whatever. Okay, so then we have access to this, and we can get in, we can view the data, we can build new tables and that kind of thing. And I'm going to hydrate here. And we're good to go.
Save it, and then I can double click here, and here we go. We're all set. We're connected. So here's all of the tables that are available to us. We have one for users and sessions and migrations and jobs and failed jobs. Most of these, I'll warn you, are used internally by the framework. And honestly, you can almost forget they exist. Especially right now, they are not important to you other than potentially this users table. So come down here, we can see the data, and in this case, there is no data yet. We don't have any records. But if I click over to the structure tab, here's the structure for each of the corresponding.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. I just said I was pausing it here for a second because I was trying to, yeah, sorry about that. Yeah. Thank you guys. I'm trying to make the font size bigger so y'all can see what is actually going on here, but it's not working. It's just, I'm clicking on it. It's not doing anything. I might just try closing and reopening it, and see if that works. Bear with me 1 second. Try this. Nope. Everything is really small. Oh, wait. Okay, that works. So I can make this part bigger. I guess that's something. I can make the like the display bigger. Um, let's see. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's something. I can at least, show you all that. So shrink this down again. Kind of move it over. But yeah, so as we click through these tables here, we can see essentially which tables actually have data in them already, and some of them do. Some of them do already have data in them. We have to limit how many tables we open here. And we can kind of talk. So for example, the user table here doesn't have any data in it yet. This is just, we can see the columns here, but they're all empty. However, if we head to the structure, this is what's going to show us our table structure. So we can see this is the column name. This is the data type, whether it's is nullable. Is it a default column or is it a foreign key? And if you don't know what those terms mean, that's okay. If you don't know anything about relational databases, that's fine. Something I do just want to point out here is that some of these things are important when you're building out your tables. Obviously, column name is going to tell you what's going to be in that column in the table. The data type is going to control what type of data can be written into that column. Can you hear me now, Frenetic? You said you need to improve your lip reading skills. I'm just making sure I think I show is unmuted on my side. I'm just making sure that I actually did unmute. Can you all hear me now? Okay, good. Just double checking. My microphone has occasionally chosen to crap out, so just double checking. All right. But yeah, so the data type is going to show what type of data can actually be written to that column. And the thing I really like about relational databases versus something like MongoDB is the fact that if, I define this column as a date time, so email verified is a date time column. If I try to write an integer to this column or a string or anything that's not a date time, it will get rejected. The row will not be written. So it's really going to help you control for bad data in your tables because you have to predefine the type of data that gets written to the column. Is nullable. Does anybody know what this means? When it says is nullable, what does that mean? Pop quiz. What does is nullable mean? Yeah, it's telling us whether or not this column is allowed to be empty. So when I write a new record to this table, what this is telling me is that it has to contain, at minimum, an ID value, a name value, an email, and a password. Everything else, the email, the remember token, created at, updated at, all these values could potentially be null. They don't have to be, but they could be. But if we try to write a record where any of these values are null, then the record will be rejected. Yeah. Column default, we don't really need to care about that. Foreign key, also don't really need to care about that, but that's going to be a reference to whether this column can be used to create a join with another table. Again, that's the relational aspect, right? So if we had like another table called like user details with more information about these people, like, their preferences or whether or not they're a paid user, stuff like that, the ID value would probably be a foreign key to the user info table that we could use to join the two together. So this would probably be set as a foreign key. But right now we don't have that, so it's empty. All right, let's keep going.
Tables. So for a user, of course, a user consists of a name and an email address and a password and various timestamps, which is great. And we can append to these if we need to. So if I switch back to PHP Storm now, you'll see there's a migrations folder. And actually, I just want to show you this one more time. If I switch back to the command line, when we ran that PHP artisan migrate command, it ran these files right here. Have a look. Create users table, create cache, create jobs table. So it seems like the logic for creating one of these tables is coded in PHP, which is neat. If I switch back, let's open it up, and here are the 3 files. Now, these are long file names because they include the timestamp, but that's okay. So if we have a look at the users table, let's hide the sidebar. Yeah, this is, think of this as the blueprint for a table. So we can see right here, we want to create a table called users, and then create a table called password reset tokens, and then create a table called sessions. And real quick, if I switch back, there's users, there's password reset tokens, and there's sessions. They're all here, and they were defined within this very file. Okay, so now within the closure here, this is where we construct the table effectively. So a users table needs to have a unique ID. So we call this ID method. Let's come back. There's the ID. Next, it should have a name, and that should be of type string. So there's a name. Next, it should have another string column for email, but we want that one to be unique. And yeah, we can keep going on here. We have a password, we have timestamps, and they're all represented here. Okay, so what if we wanted to add something else? Like what if instead of name, we wanted first name and then last name? Well, I could do something just like this. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and modify this migration as well. I've got it open here. And essentially what this is doing is this kind of your first glimpse of, kind of how this ORM helps us. If you don't know SQL, it does something very similar to what you would do if you're writing a SQL statement. So this would be very similar to like a create table statement in SQL, right? You're defining the names of each element, and then you're also defining the data types and any default values and any unique characteristics for those fields. So instead of having to know how to write a create table statement, you can just essentially define it this way as a migration. So we're going to say, instead of just name, we're going to change the table structure. Essentially, we're going to say first name, last name. First name and last name. Save that. Now, this doesn't, by itself, this doesn't do anything. This is just a script. And where have we seen the word schema before, chat? If you're a part of 100 devs, where have we seen schema before? Anyone remember? That word might look familiar. Any 100 devers out there? But you might remember the word schema from Mongoose, right? Is it in JavaScript? It is. It's specifically when interacting with MongoDB. So even though MongoDB is not a relational database, you can use Mongoose, which is kind of an additional package, to assign schemas to Mongo's non-relational data. So you can set up a blueprint for how the data should look. Yeah, exactly. As Nocafene says, it was when we set up MongoDB 100%. And this is doing exactly the same thing. You use it to create a collection, right? And a schema here is doing literally the same thing, except we're creating a table. So the outcome is very similar, right? You're creating a structure for your data. You're defining the rules for that data. You're defining data types. And to do that, that is called, the word for doing that is called a schema. And so, yeah, here we're just essentially defining each table. We're giving it a name. And it's literally being called a blueprint here, which I think is great, because that's what it is. It's a blueprint. The schema is a blueprint for the table, defining its characteristics. And then you'll see, we've got some special characteristics here. We've got a primary key to being defined. We're setting whether or not it can be nullable, that type of thing.
But it's not magical. I can't change this file and then switch back and give it a refresh. We have to rerun the migrations. And that's what I want you to think of this file as. It's a migration file, okay? You can run your migrations to make these take effect. You can roll them back. You can reset them. It's really very cool. And actually, on this note, one of the coolest things about migrations is how, because it's defined in PHP and effectively in version control, I can then share this with a teammate, and then he or she only has to run a single command to generate a database that looks identically to mine. So there's no more of that, like trying to manually keep things in sync. Oh, what's your table look like? Did you add the index here? Make sure yours looks like mine. That's a nightmare. You don't want to get into that situation. And this solves that. Okay, so let's make this take effect. I'll switch back to the terminal and run PHP Artisan to view all of the available commands, and we'll scroll up to the ones related to running our migrations. Now, I see two immediately useful ones: migrate, refresh. And notice that resets everything and starts your migrations from scratch. So, of course, you would never run this within production because it would drop all of your database records. But yeah, in the initial development stage, this is incredibly helpful. It's a way to say, okay, just drop everything and build up my database from scratch once again. The next useful one is migrate rollback. Roll back the latest or most recent database migration. So yeah, notice if I open up the sidebar, each of these is its own migration, and you will create more on your own. So you could have a migration to make a table. You could have a migration to drop a table. You could have a migration to add a couple columns to a table or remove a column. Any of those could be their own migrations. Just think of them as actions that you want to perform on a database, okay? So you could say, well, just roll back the most recent one we ran and then rerun it. These are all things that you can do directly from the command line. Okay, but yeah, in our case, we haven't done anything yet, so I will refresh all of our migrations from scratch. PHP Artisan migrate : fresh.
Alrighty. So hello, BTW, by the way. Welcome to the stream. Yeah, so we're going to go ahead and PHP Artisan. Now, he used a little bit of a shortcut word there. We're going to use the whole word because I think he has some kind of a built-in keyword, but we're going to say PHP Artisan. I'm going to make sure I get this right. Go back a little bit.
I will refresh all of our...
migrate refresh. Okay.
Migrate.
Oops, I accidentally muted him. There we go. PHP Artisan migrate refresh. Oh, no, it is migrate. Well, he used migrate fresh, but he said refresh. So we're going to say refresh. We'll see if that works. I forget which one it is. Plastic World said that. Plastic Word says that's a roundabout way of saying Docker. Yeah, I think if you're sharing database schemas in a raw file, it's probably not the best way to do it. Yeah, something like Docker is going to serve you better. Okay, so watch what it's doing here when I do this. It is rolling back the migrations. So the existing ones out there, it is rolling those back. And then it's essentially just rerunning the same files. So rolling back the old ones and then rerunning essentially with the changes we made to the users table. Yeah, right, exactly. Peek and Flow says they should rename it to migrate I am not on prod. Yeah, this is something you would literally never, ever, ever do in a production environment if you care about your data. Now, there's some cases where you don't, I will say. So for my work, I work as a senior data engineer. There are some tables that we load fresh every single night. And so the data itself maybe doesn't matter all that much, because we're getting fresh data every single night. So if we needed to change the table structure, maybe not a big deal. But in the most case, yeah, you would never do this. You would never want to nuke your data just to change table structure. You would want to change the structure in place, leaving the data intact if you can, or, back up the data first, that type of thing. So yeah, don't do this in prod. But yeah, this is just kind of showing how it works. Let's go back into our table now, and we'll need to refresh this. There we go. So I refreshed the table structure here, and now you can see I have 2 new fields. So where there was just a name field before, we now have first name and last name, both of them varchars. Varchar just means string, if you didn't know. It means just variable character.
Artisan migrate : fresh, and notice it drops all of the tables and then rebuilds them from scratch. Okay, so let's go back to Table Plus. And actually, this is an important note that you will run into specifically with SQLite. So if I try to hit Command R to refresh, notice I'm not seeing any difference. So what I have to do in this situation is close out and then reopen.
That's no longer true. I think they've patched that bug since he recorded this video, because now you can just click the refresh button and your table structure will update just fine. So
connection. So let's close it out, reopen it from scratch. And now if I come back and switch to structure, I can see the changes there. Very cool. Okay, so now I want to finish up by creating our first migration. So let's go back to the command line. And I'm going to say PHP artisan make migration. And now,
all right, PHP artisan make migration. So this is going to create a new one of these files. And migrations are actually useful. That's something even though I don't use Laravel at work, we do make migration files for when we have changes between environments. So we'll just make a big old honking file with a bunch of script changes in it. And we have a tool that will automatically run that into the next environment. So if we are migrating changes from dev to QA, we do those on a set day so that our users know that it's coming. And so we just combine those all together in a migration file. We run it up, we run those changes in, and everything takes effect. So yeah, migrations are a thing. Hey Rex, good to see you.
Now it'll ask me a question. What should the migration be named? Keep it very simple. Just describe what you're doing. If you're creating a table, then write create such and such table. Now, we actually have something a little bit tricky here. I want to call it jobs, right? However, Laravel already includes a table out of the box called jobs. So yeah, we don't want to double up there. So we'll need to embellish it in some way. Why don't we call it job listings table? All right, and now it creates a file in that same migrations directory. If I switch back, I can find it here. So now I see 2 methods, up and down. Up represents applying the operation, whatever you want to change or add or remove. And then down should do the inverse. So this is do the thing, and then this one is undo the thing. So in our case, the initial scaffolding is to create a table called job listings. But if we undo the thing, then we would drop that table entirely. As another example, if you had a migration to add a column, then here you'd add the column, and down here you would remove the column. And that way you can apply the migration or roll it back at any given time. Okay, so they've given us some initial suggestions. Well, your table should have a unique ID, and it should have some default timestamps. When was this record created? When was this record last updated? And those are usually good ideas to include. All right, so go back to job. And yeah, it looks like for each one, we just need to add a title and a salary. So let's do that now. Table, string for the title of the job listing. And then for the salary, we can actually set this in a number of ways. If we're thinking of it as money, then we would want to think in terms of cents. That's generally a good way to deal with money, a foolproof way to deal with money. In our case, though, we're thinking of salary as whatever the employer wants to put. They could put $500 a month or $50,000 a year or something else. So I'm going to keep that as a simple string column, salary.
That's probably something you would never do in production. You would never allow something like salary to be defined as a string because it will never make any sense ever. People are going to be putting in whatever the hell they want, and you will never be able to do any kind of analysis or sorting or get any kind of meaningful insight out of that field ever. So generally, you would not want to define something like salary as a string. You would want to define it at minimum as something like an integer, ideally as something that is a specific sort of currency. But hey, we're just screwing around here. This is dev. I just want to put that out there as from a database design perspective, never ever define something like that as just a raw string. Right, I know. Rex says, so you mean I can't write a bajillion dollars in salary? Yeah, I wish, but no. Yeah, defining something like that as a string is just asking for trouble and making it it's going to give you a lot of headaches in the future if you try to do anything with that field going forward. Yeah. Yeah, 100%, Rex. I'm with you there. All right, but we're going to do it even though it makes my skin crawl. We're like, for something like title, that's fine. A string is the right choice. But yeah, for salary, it is the objectively the wrong choice. But we're going to do it. Oops, I can't even spell the word salary. I don't even want to type it. All right. Oh, and I'm going to put timestamps at the end, so I'm following along. Here we go.
All right, that's it.
Celery.
So I've created a migration class. I've defined the blueprint for that table. Now I want to run the migration. So this time I'm not going to run migrate fresh because I don't need to reset and start all over. I just need to apply that newest migration. So I can run PHP Artisan migrate. And notice it knows.
Yeah, so if we just run PHP Artisan migrate, it's going to know which is the thing that it hasn't migrated yet. So what is the new thing? In this case, it is our new table here, job listings. So we'll run that. There we go. I'll pull this up so you can see. Yeah, create job listings table. So now let's go back here. Probably need to refresh. Yep, there we go. And then when I refresh, we can see we've got our job listings table. There is no data in it currently. But if I go to the structure, there we go. ID, title, salary. Created at and updated at.
It doesn't need to do the other ones. It already did those. The only one it hasn't yet done is this one here. Okay, so let's come back to Table Plus and maybe hit Command R to give it a refresh. But yeah, if I come back, here it is. All right, there we go. So now I'd like to finish up by populating some records by switching to the Data tab. So if I switch back to the job file, we have director, programmer, and teacher. So I'll do this very quickly. Director, salary is some arbitrary number. I'm going to leave the timestamps at their defaults for now. I'll do another one, programmer, 60,000, whatever. And then one for teacher, also 50,000, something like that.
Okay, so yeah, we're going to go ahead and just use the GUI to update these. We could write an insert statement too. This tool does have a SQL editor where you could write an insert statement to do this if you wanted. We're just going to use the GUI here. It's fine. So I can click the plus button to add a row. I don't need to put anything in ID. I'll just say director. Yeah, these salary amounts are a little weird, but that's fine. And then we'll leave those other two blank, and then we'll add another and another. All right, so director, programmer, 60,000. Leave those two blank. Teacher. Oops. Oh, come on. There we go. Teacher. 50,000 and leave everything else blank. And we can populate those records. So now something to note here is that I believe we're going to have to commit these, but he'll tell us in a minute.
So notice they're green. That means I've created the records, but I haven't yet committed them. To commit them, you can hit Command or Control S. And now.
Yeah, so as he mentioned, again, something you might not be familiar with if you're not familiar with relational databases. Oops, and I should probably fix that. Again, this is the problem with putting something like salary as a string. I put a slash in here, which makes no sense for a numeric value like this, but it allowed it because it's a string. So bad idea. Anyway, if you're not familiar with the relational databases, you might not know what a commit is. Essentially, what you're doing when you're doing something like you're adding a new record or you're deleting a record or you're altering a record, when you're making a data change, oftentimes it's only going to write that change locally first, and you can query that change. You can, make sure it's doing what you want it to do, especially if you're doing a mass update on a bunch of different rows. You want to make sure that that change is correct and it's doing what you expected before you go in and you change 50,000 rows, right? So it's going to write that change locally first, but if anybody else, let's say you're using a database that's shared between a bunch of people. If anybody else were to query that data, they would not see your change yet because it hasn't been committed. It's only been sort of locally applied. Yeah, and that's why I kind of want to bring it up because it's different than like a git commit. Well, no, actually not really. Actually, no, it's essentially the same concept. So essentially what we've done here is git add. Right? We've staged the change. It's there. We can see it. We can see what change is going to be made. We've done the git add. And then once we do the git commit, then that is when that change is actually written to, in Git's case, it's written to the Git history. And in the database case, that's when it's actually written to the database and the change is actually applied. So we can do Control S. And then once I do that, it's been committed. Yep. So essentially, yeah, commit means the same for both Git and in concept anyway. It means the same thing for both Git and a database. So that's a good way to think about it, actually.
That has been committed. Okay,
Hey,
recap.
Toby.
So we have now created a new job listings table and we manually populated it with a handful of records. So we used a migration class to define the initial structure of that table. We ran the migration by running PHP artisan migrate from the command line. So now things are looking pretty good, but of course the next step is I want to fetch that data from the database and then render it in the view. So how do we do that? Well, I'll show you in the next episode.
Yeah, so that's a really great question, Peak. They say, is that feature of a tool like Table Plus? Like if you type that insert in a SQL console, do you need to commit or does it auto update? By default, so it depends on, sometimes it depends on what flavor of SQL you're using and the settings in whatever tool you're using to interact with the database. I will say it depends, but the commit, the action of doing a commit is a standard feature of just SQL in general. So in most cases, that's kind of sometimes you can like set a tool to auto commit by default. So if you don't care about, spot checking your work first and you just want it to always auto commit your changes because you're always right, a lot of the times you can set whatever tool you're working in to auto commit. And commits don't take place for every action either. So if I were to drop a table or truncate a table, it's not going to ask me to commit first because that's a structural, that's like a structural change. But yes, to answer your question, it's not a tool specific feature. It's a feature that you'll find across multiple flavors of SQL. However, the default behavior of commits, whether or not they are on or off by default, can depend on the flavor of SQL you're using and the specific tool you're using to interact with SQL. Yep. So for example, when and this may have been an organizational setting, I'm not 100% sure, it's been a few years. When I worked with SQL Server, auto commits were on by default, which was, I was just used to it because I worked in that environment, but auto commits were on by default. I'd be curious if anybody else worked with SQL Server in the past, if that's just a SQL Server thing, or if that is, if my organization was just stupid. But now, when I use PL SQL Developer and Oracle SQL, commits, we have to first run your change in, you check whether it's correct, you can query against it, and then you have to, either use a keyboard command or click a button to actually commit that change for it to go into effect for everyone else. Yeah. Hey, Subtleties, good to see you. All right, so we are finished with this lesson. Let's take a break. We are overdue. Sound of Gaming says, I haven't touched SQL in a long time. I just rely on Django's ORM. Yeah, that's a great point, right? Like, I always recommend that people learn the basics of SQL, like enough to write a select statement, like just do a basic query. But you don't have to, learn the more advanced stuff, like creating tables, modifying structures, all that, doing transactions, all that stuff. You don't have to get that advanced. You can use an ORM. It's fine. You can use migrations. You can use a Django ORM, whatever you want. That stuff is going to work just fine if SQL is not your interest. I would recommend understanding how to write a basic read-only SQL statement, but other than that, you don't have to learn anything more than that. It's easy to learn those basics, and then you can just stop there and just use an ORM for other stuff. I know that might get under the skin of some other SQL developers out there, but it's just, not everybody's interested in SQL, and that's fine. As much as it might hurt me personally, I'm going to be fine if you're not interested in the SQL. Yeah, and SQL Server does have transactions. Other flavors of SQL do have transactions as well. Yeah, it's just, behavior can just change depending on what flavor you're using. All right, let's take a break, folks. 5 minutes. I need more tea. My tea is stone cold and I am out of it. So need to refill on tea. We're going to take 5 minutes and we're going to come back. And what is the next lesson? Let's see what it is. Yes. Okay. So next thing we're going to go through is Eloquent, which is the ORM we are interacting with. So Laravel's built-in ORM for doing migrations, kind of like how we used Blade for the front-end stuff, right? We were using Blade for the styling and, all the built-in shortcuts and stuff for styling and templating and stuff in the previous lessons. Eloquent is another built-in tool to Laravel that allows you to quickly spin up databases just as quickly as you spun up the front end. All right, Rex, you want me to drink the dregs of my freezing cold tea? I will do that for you, Rex. Redeemed to hydrate. You redeemed to hydrate, so I gotta honor that. All right, 5 minutes, folks. I will see you back here shortly. Alrighty, folks, we got about a minute left in the break, so come on back if you're coming back. And it's as always, please pet your dogs, pet your cats, pet your significant other with their permission, of course, and then come on back. Alrighty, welcome back, folks. I just got to hook up my headphones here again. Give me 1 second to do that. Okay, there we go. We are back up and running. And I have a fresh cup of tea, and I have a snack that I would recommend too. This is not an advertisement, but I got there's an international market near where I live with really great sort of Indian food, and I got some Indian style brittle, like peanut brittle is a thing, like crunchy sweet dessert snack. I got some sesame brittle, which is really, really good. So I'm gonna snack on one of those really quickly. I can get it open. Yeah, so they're just like little squares. They've got little sesame seeds in them. They're mildly sweet, not too sweet. I like it much better than peanut brittle, actually. Mm. Very crunchy, though. I muted so you didn't have to hear me crunch. All right, let's go on to the next lesson here.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to day 9 of 30 Days to Learn Laravel. You're doing great. And I'm really excited for this one because I get to introduce you to Eloquent. And Eloquent really is one of the pillars of the Laravel framework. And I really do think you're going to love it. Okay, jargon alert. Eloquent is an ORM. Not an ORV, not an SUV, an ORM. And this stands for Object Relational Mapper. Here's how you think of it. An ORM maps an object in your database, like a table row, to an object in your PHP code. So think about it. We can go into Table Plus and view the details for a single record, a row. Wouldn't it be cool if that record just had some kind of representation in your PHP code? Just like I can see a comment or a post within my database. What if I just had a post object that included all of those details? Well, that's sort of what you can think of when we reference the term ORM. Or you might have heard of Active Record. This is Laravel's Active Record implementation. And again, you're gonna love it. So let's have a look. Okay, so return to your editor and open up your job class. I want to convert this into an Eloquent model, and it's really simple. But first up, this data here is superfluous, right? It's being stored in the database. We don't have to double up. So I will remove that entirely just for now. Okay.
All right, pausing for just a second so I can get to the right file here. So we're going back to our jobs class. So the reason we're doing that is because this is where we essentially defined our static data before, but we're going to turn this into a essentially a database friendly sort of function instead. Rather than statically defining the data, we're going to make it so we can just fetch this data from our database. All right, so I got to go back to see what he deleted there. Hang on.
Convert this into an eloquent model, and it's really simple. But first up, this data here is superfluous, right? It's being stored in the database. We don't have to double up. So I will remove.
Okay, so yeah, essentially just returning it, just deleting the static data. We don't need it anymore. Make sure I only delete what's necessary here. Okay, great.
That entirely just for now. Okay. So all I have to do to make a class, a PHP class, into an eloquent model is to extend the model class. So I can say extends model, and you want it to be Illuminate Database Eloquent Model. So in my editor, that automatically gets imported as.
Oh, hey, free. Oh, no. Yeah, I would be happy to answer that question. If you're able to stick around a little bit, I would love to answer that question in detail for you because I like that question a lot. You're asking, do you have tips for public speaking? I see you speak fluently in front of around 600 users on Discord, which is dope. Thank you. If I were you, I'd study a lot. No, that's fine. I would love to answer your question if you're willing to stick around until the end of this lesson. Would you be okay with that? And then I can absolutely answer your question. So I do have to, I'm going to go ahead and, all right, awesome. So it didn't auto import for me, and that's okay. So I can just copy this and do the import statement automatically. We'll say illuminate database eloquent and then slash model, just to make sure that it knows where to find that namespace. Okay, so I've got all the import statements I need. Lutak, welcome to the stream. And they say, hello, yeah, thank you for chiming in. They say, and then the model class inherits everything from job class, even the constructor. Yeah, we're doing the extend here. That's a great point. We're doing the extend. And because we're essentially saying, all right, we want this to become essentially a literal model, a database model, and we already have, the eloquent tool essentially contains this default model class. And so anything we want to become a database model, we can just extend the model class with our new class that we're creating.
As you see here. Okay, but notice immediately when I did that, we got this red squiggly line. Declaration must be compatible with model all. So as you can imagine, Eloquent has its own API for how we can query the database. And part of that API is a method called all. And also part of that API is a method called find. So you know what we can do? Yep, we're getting rid of it all.
Yeah, so essentially what we're doing here is rather than previously we had to define these methods ourselves. We had to define what they are, what they do. They were custom methods. But the model class actually contains methods called find and all by default. So we don't need to redefine them if they already exist. So boop, we can just use the ones that already exist. Lutak says, that's awesome. Yeah, thank you, Lutak. Keep learning. Yeah, absolutely. I don't really rate websites. I think, everybody's going to have a different definition of what makes a website good or bad. But that's awesome that, you've built your own website. That's very cool. And thank you for the compliment. Thank you for the encouragement, Lutak. Sound says, I must be really out of the PHP loop. Did PHP add some static type checking? It looks like C# bled with JavaScript. I wouldn't disagree. One of my gripes with PHP was the weak type system. And yeah, Peak explained that pretty well. They say PHP is still weakly typed, but now allows for type hinting. Yeah, and that's kind of what we've been doing here, is that in some of these, which I think I just deleted it, but yeah, so you can see here, like we're hinting at what type this function, should so, we're saying, all right, this is what's going to be passed in. This is what this function should return. And so it does allow for type hinting in that way. Yep. You don't have, but you don't have to do this either. Like you don't have to specify a type here. It'll still work without it. But you can if you want that higher layer of specificity. Oops, crud. Redo that and redo that. There we go.
There's no reason to reinvent this wheel. Okay, fun. So now let's play around. Let's go into the routes file, and yeah, within the home route, we're just temporarily going to try out some queries.
Yeah, so essentially what you're going to see now is how do you write queries, not in SQL, but in the Eloquent ORM, which will then essentially compile that into SQL under the hood. So without knowing SQL, how can you write a SQL query? I got to find my file here again. Too many files open. I'm going to close some stuff. Bear with me for a second. I have too many things open. Get rid of you, get rid of you. I always do this. I always open a crap ton of stuff and never close it. All right, there we go. This is what I wanted. Okay. So this is my routes file here. And so we're just going to do some stuff directly. Oh yeah, sound. Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like it's been maybe a while since you used PHP, but you're finding some stuff that you might like. That's awesome. Yeah, and Laravel is kind of on top of basic PHP, so I don't know what base PHP has, but Laravel might have some stuff that you find interesting. Oh, thank you, Peak. Yeah, I appreciate the extra context there. PHP is world away from 5, way faster, and Laravel is hands down the nicest framework I ever worked with. It is a pretty nice framework, I gotta say. Our dear friend Leah T Codes, if you know her, she's another coding streamer, educational streamer here on Twitch. She recently just got a job with Laravel. And so, any place that is willing to hire my friend Leah, I'm going to try to, I'm going to give their product a fair shake. So, yeah, I like it. It's a good framework.
So I will reference our job model. And notice we have all of these methods that we can call due to the fact that we extended that model class. So let's try out job all.
Yeah, and that's kind of what Lutak was mentioning there, is that since we extended the model class with our job class, now within our job class, we now have access natively to all of the methods that are in model. So I can say job all without having to explicitly define the all method in the job class, because we said job extends model. So job is going to say, oh, I have access to everything that the model class already contains.
And let's just see what happens. Is that instantly going to give me all of the records from that job listings table? Well, let's see. We'll try to get our jobs, and then we will die and dump the response.
Yeah, so we're just going to dump those into a variable and see what we get. Job all, and then DD, which is again shorthand for die and dump and die, which is just going to console log it and then kill the execution. So save this and also save this, and then yeah. So if we just go back to the home page, oops. Okay, so because I didn't name my variable correctly, jobs. There we go. Yeah, so jobs. Yeah, exactly. Oh my goodness, the last time I touched PHP was in 2015. Yeah, technology changes so fast, right? You never know what's going to change in that time.
Okay, to the browser. All right, well, I do see a collection, but notice the items are empty. So we have an empty collection, and we know that's not right. So what's the problem? Okay, well, here's a key thing to understand. Laravel and Eloquent, by extension, rely heavily on conventions. So if we switch back, if we have a job Eloquent model, Eloquent is going to assume that you have a table called jobs. But if I switch to Table Plus, the table isn't called jobs, because remember, we had a little bit of a collision there, didn't we? Laravel already includes one out of the box called jobs, so we had to tweak ours. Okay, so we have two choices to resolve this. One would be to rename this to job listing. And notice how the name of the class is the singular form of the table. So if you had a table called comments, your Eloquent model would be comment. If you had a table called posts, then your Eloquent model would be called post, right? That's an important thing to keep in mind.
And actually, MongoDB does the exact same thing. MongoDB with Mongoose, if you define a schema or if you are interacting, I think particularly in terms of schemas and models, if you're defining those in Mongoose, it does the same thing where it's kind of extrapolating, table names based on plurals and that type of thing. So it's a similar behavior. Yeah, and Frenetic says, "What if it was called sheep?" Yeah, in terms of Mongoose, our good friend Rascal 2 actually tested that. He actually came up with a bunch of weird plurals like goose or sheep, or fish, and they actually tested that in terms of what would it do? Would it pluralize the name? And it did. It actually they had hard coded, like I assume they had hard coded the association of what was supposed to have an S on the end and what was not. And it actually worked properly. So I thought that was pretty funny. So I would assume that something similar would happen here.
So we could do this, or in situations where you want a unique table name, you can add a protected property called table, and then here I can assign it, job listings. Okay.
Yeah, so we're just going to do that. And essentially, and just to give you a sense of what this is actually doing, when he mentioned, that it was, extrapolating the table name based on the class name, what that's going to translate to, give me just 1 second here, listings. What that's essentially translating that to is when we call jobs all, that's essentially just doing this. If you're thinking in terms of SQL, you're doing a select star from jobs. Now, since we've set a actual table alias here, it would be this. That's what that's doing. Select star from job listings. That's what that's going to translate to in SQL.
So now if I switch back to the browser, now we have a collection of 3 items. And check this out. Each item itself is an instance of that new job class. So now we have a place to tuck any behavior that's related to a job. Whereas before we didn't have that. We were just dealing with simple scalars. There was nowhere to put that logic except in your routes file, which doesn't quite make sense most of the time. Okay, so if we scroll down, you'll see there's an attribute section that has information about the title and the salary for this particular row. If we go to the next one, this one I believe is programmer, and then of course the third one would be teacher. Okay, so check this out. If we go back to my routes file, if I want to grab the first item, well,
okay, going back to my routes file here.
We have a couple ways to do it. So jobs is a collection, as we've seen. And one way that we can interact with that collection is to treat it as if it were an array. So that means if I want the first job, I can just grab the first index within that array, so to speak. Okay, so if we come back and we scroll up and give it a refresh, now I don't have a collection. I have a single job instance that contains these attributes. And if I want to grab one of these values, I just reference it directly like this, title.
Okay, so how that would translate into SQL would be something like select title from, job listings. And then to get the first one, it would depend on what flavor of SQL you're using, but you might say select, top 1 title from job listings. That would just get you the first one. Or if you wanted to be, if they were arranged in order of ID and you just wanted the first ID, you'd say something like top 1 title from job listings, order by ID ascending, something like that. But you can see here where the ORM makes it a little bit more succinct, right? Instead of having to write all of this by hand, as a SQL query, instead you can just do treat it like an array and get the first element. So,
and if I want to grab one of these values, I just reference it directly like this.
So we can say, a bit more succinctly, DD jobs, get the first one. And only return the title. There we go.
Title, director, salary, $50,000. If I want to grab the next item, I can just do 1, and this will be $60,000, and the title is Programmer. Cool. So you see how easy that was? We were able to entirely strip our little API that we built in that job class because Eloquent includes it and way more directly out of the box, which is really cool. So I want to see now if I can reproduce our list of jobs. So right down here, when the user...
Okay, so we're gonna reset our little we're gonna reset our route here just because we don't need this here. So I'm just gonna say return view and home. Save. Okay. Butcher, that's a great question. They say, is there performance benefits for using one over the other, ORM versus SQL? Yeah, definitely. So it depends on volume, right? And it depends on use case. But in general, the way you want to think about it is the closer you can get to where the calculations are actually happening, the better performance you're going to have. So if you think about it in terms of that, that's why like assembly language is much harder to write, but it's much faster than any higher level language, right? The lower level you program, the faster you're going to get results because there's fewer layers of abstraction and translation to go through until you actually get to the logic that you want to perform. So yeah, see, raw SQL is going to be faster. But it depends, right? It's going to be like a measure of scale versus effort. If you can write SQL directly and you're doing, huge queries against massive tables, yeah, it's going to be faster if you can write a direct SQL query. But for stuff like this, for most applications, an ORM is fine. If you're returning single records or not doing anything, for basic general app logic, an ORM is not going to be a noticeable difference. Peak says, would calling raw SQL from PHP be faster than Eloquent? Probably, because essentially what Eloquent is doing is it's compiling this down to SQL anyway, and then it's running the SQL. So that's what's happening under the hood. It's an extra step, right? You're writing something in Eloquent, you're writing your query in Eloquent language, but then that just gets compiled down to SQL and then it runs the SQL. So it would be faster if you could just call the SQL directly. But again, it's at the scale of most applications, it's not going to matter. For the type of work that I do, like, oh no, no worries, Matthias. Hello. Good to see you. We're just talking about databases and Laravel. And Laravel has a framework called Eloquent that allows you to essentially build tables and deal with database structures without having to learn SQL. So it's nice, if you just want to build a full stack app and you want to just write the entire thing in PHP, Eloquent's got your back. Right. Developer productivity or faster to market. Now, so in my role as a data engineer, I'm dealing with tables. I'm performing, operations against tables that have hundreds of millions of rows, right? I would not want to do that through an ORM. I want to do that directly with SQL because transaction time is going to matter. It's going to make a difference. My queries are going to be noticeably faster if I just write them directly in SQL. But in most cases, again, it's all about economies of scale, right? It's about developer productivity or faster to market, that type of thing. Yeah, sometimes it's just easier to just write everything in the same language and then just have it work. So yeah, for pretty much anything you're going to build, you could do 6 of one, half dozen of the other. And then if you start noticing performance issues, then you can think about maybe ditching the ORM and finding a different way to do it. But most case, just use the tool that makes the most sense for the job.
User visit/jobs, we fetch them all, and then we load a view called jobs. So I wonder, will this just work right out of the box? I think it should. So back to the browser, let's click on jobs, and it just...
Yeah, and this is a great, so we already, like previously we defined a custom method called all, right? And it was just saying, fetch all the jobs and show them in this view. So now we're going to see if I shouldn't have to change anything here. We've already called in the all method from the model. Yeah, Matthias, exactly. This is Laravel PHP, right? Which you've never seen before, but you get the sense of it, right? You can kind of tell what it does. It looks a little bit like JavaScript. There's some stuff that's different, but there's a lot of stuff that looks very familiar. And that's the cool thing about learning to code, right? Is that once you learn one language, it doesn't really matter what it is. Once you learn one language, you are going to see things you recognize in other languages. Yeah, so let's try this now. So we can go back to the home page. This works. We're gonna go back to the job page here. Yeah, we didn't have to change anything about the way that this route works because this job class extends the model class, which already contains a method called all. And now we can just say, all right, get all the jobs, and it works. Oh, I have my DD here set still, and then click this. Let's see if this one works too. Yeah, so I don't even have to change anything here either. I can leave all this alone. It works. Just using the built-in find method, it's querying my database. And what this is essentially doing, just in SQL, in terms of SQL, is this is essentially just compiling to a SQL statement that says select star from job listings where ID equals, whatever ID was passed in, right? So, and that's going to return everything from job listings. And so again, this is just, this find method is just shorthand for this SQL statement right here. And when it compiles to this SQL statement, it runs it, and then it returns the result.
Works, but now we're no longer hard coding that array. Okay, what about a single job? Yep, that one works just as before. Very cool. Now, we're not quite ready for forms yet, but we're going to tackle that very soon. But of course, we can also use Eloquent to insert or delete records from the database. So I'll show you a new way that we can play around here. Open up your command line, then run PHP Artisan Tinker.
Butcher says, can we confirm SQL it generates? Do you mean, can we see the SQL statements it's compiling to? I mean, there may be a way to do that. I don't know. I can tell you that, this is what it's doing. And we could run this SQL in the SQL editor. So we could do this here. Oh, that's really small. Why is that so small? Be bigger. There we go. Where ID, let's say we pass in like a value of 1. We should be able to just run this. What's the run key? I forget what the run key is. Is it Control R? No, that's refresh. What's the run key? Oh, you can't with Eloquent. If you use Query Builder, you can do, there's a toSQL method. Okay, the toSQL function. Okay. Where's the run button? Sorry, I forget how to do this. Control Enter, maybe? Ah, there we go. Yeah, Control Enter is the key. Yeah, exactly. Why is it so small? Be bigger. Yep, that's what she said. 100%. Good one. But yeah, so when I run this, you can see that it's bringing back essentially what the same thing that PHP is bringing back, that Eloquent is bringing back. Now that was a good one, Matthias. I like that.
Think of this as your command line playground for your Laravel app. It's a great way to get your bearings and try things out and see, does this work the way I expect it to? You can create variables, you can grab them, you can manipulate things, you can make sure, like I said, that when you call this function, is it returning what you expect? Let's play around and see if that works. This is a good place to do that. So why don't we play around with Eloquent? App, models, job. And if I want to create a job, we call a method create.
And so essentially what we're doing here is this is just this Tinker tool is kind of similar to like the Python shell, where you can obviously you want to have more complicated scripts in their own file, but if you just want to run some simple commands, do some simple operations, test some stuff, you can open up a shell and just run some commands directly. So in this case, we're going to say app models job, not John, job, and then call the create method against job. Nope. Not null constraint failed. Okay. Let's see what this says here.
All incredibly readable. So for the
Oh,
values,
yeah, because I need to actually put in values. That's right. Yeah, that makes sense. So I can't just call create directly. And but I like this error message. This is a great error message, and I want to show it to you.
we can provide
So,
an
hang on. I want to show you this error message because this is the cool thing, again, about relational databases, why they're so good. So I tried to run an empty create statement against the job listings table. This is trying to insert an empty record into the job listings table. And I get an error message. Oops, and I just closed my terminal. Hang on. I just got an error message that is telling me that there is an integrity constraint violation because it's like not null constraint failed in job listings.title, because we have said that there has to be a title value in the job listings table. That is a required field. And so when I tried to insert a record that didn't have that field populated, it rejected the record and said, you can't do that. Gave me a slap on the wrist for it. So that's a nice thing about relational databases is they're going to enforce whatever structure you set up.
array here. So a job listing has a title. So I'm just going to say Acme director. And then a salary is going to be $1 million.
$1 million.
And I believe those are the only ones we have here.
All right. So yeah, the only required fields are going to be title and salary. Now, to me, doing it this way is slower than doing it as an insert statement, but we're going to just play along here. Salary. Salary is $1 million. And notice how I have to define 1 million as a string, which you probably can't see that because it's behind my face, but just trust me. Okay, close my array and semicolon. Yeah, right, Matthias, exactly. Here we see a list struggling in the wild. Yep, 100%. Error unclear, paste messages into ChatGPT without thinking. Gotta learn to troubleshoot, my friend. All right, I think that's all we need here.
All right, so you call a create method, you pass an array, and you include all of the relevant columns that your table will require. So if we run that, though, we get a mass assignment exception. To be honest, I wish this didn't happen out of the box because I think it is immediately confusing to newcomers, and it requires a bit of knowledge that you may not have yet. Now, effectively, what's going on here is Laravel is providing some safety and security out of the box. It's saying, hey, you might want to be a little bit careful about mass assigning these attributes all in one go. And that's exactly what we did here, by the way. And it's fine if you know what you're doing. But again, Laravel's just trying to keep you on the straight and narrow. So yeah, what's the potential danger? Well, in real life, you will often be responding to a form request, right? So you could have a form to update the title of a post. The user submits that form, and you could potentially just pass the array of those form attributes to this create method. But, rule number one when dealing with users is you have to assume they are malicious and they're trying to do something wrong. So what if they tweaked that form request to also update the author ID of the post as well? And you didn't know that. You didn't ask them to do that, but they snuck it in anyways. Well, if you then blindly pass that array of attributes to the create method, you're no longer updating the title of the post like you thought. You're also updating the author of the post, which could be catastrophic. Now imagine a scenario where you're updating the admin status for a user and you didn't even know you were doing it. So this is what Laravel is protecting against. As long as you are thoughtful and you know exactly what data is being passed to the create method, it's entirely safe. But that being said, Laravel by default protects you against this, and you either have to turn off the feature or do what we're about to do right now. Notice after the red warning, I see add title to the fillable property to allow mass assignment on the job class. Okay, so I'll show you what that looks like. I can command click to go to the job class, and we can add a property called fillable. This represents all of the attributes that are allowed to be mass assigned. So, for example, if I wrote title and salary, this means these two items and these two items alone may be mass assigned. So, if that malicious actor tries to update the user ID as well, it would be as if they never did it because it will be ignored entirely when we pass it to that create method in this example. Okay, so let's come back. I'm going to hit Control C to exit out, and then we will open PHP Artisan Tinker one more time. All right, and now, rather than rewriting this by hand, you can usually press the up arrow key to cycle between your old commands. Okay, so if I run it now, it's going to work. There we go.
Okay, so I still got the mass assignment error. I thought I wanted to try and see if I would still get it, because essentially, when you first start up Tinker, it's going to read the properties of whatever you're trying to access, and so it's not going to reread. I updated those properties as as shown here, but I need to essentially re-ingest those properties again. So I'm going to terminate the job here, and we're going to start up Tinker again, Artisan Tinker, and then we should be able to get this again. There we go. And when I run it again, it works. Yeah, Matthias, nice way to say users are dumb. Yeah. Well, and that's what I like about relational databases is just by default, they do have a lot of those protections against putting the wrong thing in the wrong place. But, it depends on how many of those protections you decide to implement and where you decide to put them. Ideally, you would have, form validation on the front end, you would have additional validation in your controllers, and then you'd have additional validation in your database. Matthias says somebody in 100 devs asked what they should do when their users broke the whole website, despite them telling them exactly how to update the HTML and CSS. Yeah, bad idea. Don't tell people how to do that. don't do that. Oh boy, I wonder what their use case was for trying to tell their users to change the HTML and CSS. It's sad that people would do that, especially when someone's learning. But yeah, don't give people access to your stuff. It will get broken. I mean, I love you guys. Like, I love you, chat. But every time we are working with a database and I'm showing that database on screen for any reason, immediately after the stream, I change the password. I know, even if I know I didn't show you the password, I change the password as soon as as soon as I end the stream, bam, change password. Just because you never know, right? So be careful, folks.
So it creates the record within the database table, and then it returns to you a new job instance that includes all of those attributes. Okay, very cool. So let's inspect all of our jobs. Job all, and we should have 4 items.
Yeah, so again, this is just essentially just running like a select query. It's the equivalent of select star from job listings, app models, job, and then we call the all method here. Run that, and there we go. We just get back an object with all of our job listings in it, and we can see the we can see that the one that was updated, that we just finished updating. Yeah, love you, but don't trust you, 100%. Peak says validation is good for making sure your database is not just safe, but also, having phone column with 8 different ways to enter a number is a nightmare to query. Yeah, exactly. So validation isn't just for making sure that people don't enter, garbage for the hell of it, but it's also to ensure data integrity. So you can come back later and run a query and know what to expect, or know if you build 3 apps reading from the same database that each of those 3 apps are going to have a common data language between them, right? If I query the same column, it's always going to have the same data type, so I can build an app around that data. It also ensures data validation, data integrity, and the ability to do analytics on that data, which you really shouldn't overlook. Anytime you're collecting data, that data only has value if you're able to analyze it, if you're able to get insights out of it in some way. So Yeah, data analytics is also requires good data.
And we do. We have the initial 3 that we created, and we have our 4th one. And also notice in this case, because we're going through Eloquent, it will automatically set these default timestamps, which is very cool. All right, so we now know the all method, we know the create method, but what about that find method that we manually created an episode or 2 ago? Well, of course, we can use that as well. I'll show you. App, models, job, find, and we need to give it a unique identifier. So that's why most tables will include some kind of unique ID, as you see here. So if I want to find this new one I created, I could say find 7. And that will return to me that record from the database. So keep in mind what's going on here. It's not magical. A SQL query, of course, is still being executed at some point behind the scenes. But yeah, sometimes it does feel magical. And you know what? It effectively is magic. The Eloquent code base is very, 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 very complicated and confusing. I don't know what I'm seeing when I look at it. But that's the great thing. I don't have to know what's going on there. It just works. So now, rather than memorizing or learning how to write these potentially confusing SQL queries, Eloquent tucks that away behind a nice API. I have a method called all to fetch all the records. I have a method called find to find a specific record. Of course, I can add conditions like where. I can add joins. I can do anything I can imagine behind this nice, clean API. All right, so if I go back to Table Plus, let's give this a refresh, and now we see our new record. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and delete these old ones, and we'll stick with only the ones that were generated through Eloquent, and that's fine. But now if I switch back, if I want to delete this job, then I could simply say job delete. Whoops.
Yeah, standing on the shoulders of giants, absolutely. But that kind of what he just said there about how complicated the Eloquent code base is and how it all just executes down to SQL at the lower end. That's what I was talking about, in terms of complexity and execution time, right? Sometimes these things are going to be, slower at scale if you choose to use something that requires many layers of abstraction on top of the SQL that it's going to execute. But again, not going to matter unless you get into very large scale queries or tons of concurrent users and all that kind of thing. For the sake of this learning exercise, absolutely does not matter.
Just forgot the $sign. One more time, and notice that returns true to indicate it was successfully.
Yeah, so what I just did there is I just deleted a couple, jobs 1 through 3 using the GUI here. However, you can also do that and it's just writing a delete statement, a delete SQL statement under the hood. But we can say job, because we have we have stored in this variable already. Can say job delete. Oh, sorry, hang on. Job. I didn't assign my variable. I thought I did, but so we got to say job title. When did he assign that? I think I skipped that statement. That's all right. I'm not going to worry about that. But anyway, just you can assign something here as a variable. I thought I did that, but I guess I skipped that one. That's fine. But yeah, you can call delete. It's just going to delete the record.
Deleted. If I switch back, give it a refresh, now it's gone. Okay.
And that would be the equivalent of just saying delete from job listings where ID equals 4. So that'd be essentially this. Query OK. And if we refresh, it's gone.
So I think we're in pretty good shape now. You've had your first introduction to Eloquent. The only remaining thing I want to show you is that in this example, we already had a job class that we converted into an Eloquent model, but most of the time you will be starting from scratch. So here's what I want to leave you with, and this will be your homework as well. If I run PHP Artisan make, you'll see there are a bunch of make commands. And you learned in the last episode, these are used to generate files. So as you can imagine, there is a make model command. Now, often these will accept certain arguments, but it's hard to know which arguments those are. So I'll show you a tip. If you add help before any of these commands, it will give you help for the command. Shocker. All right, so now if we scroll up, at the very top, we can see, all right, we can provide the name of the model, and then we have various options that we can include. So when we generate a new model, this is often the start of a new concept in your application. So it's a great entry point for also constructing other things. And that's why we have these options like -C to also create a companion controller for the model, or a factory, or a migration, or a policy, or a seeder. You don't know what a lot of these are yet, but you will soon. So notice the one at the top, -A or --all, which is the long form. It would generate a migration, a seeder, a factory, a policy, a resource controller, and a form request in addition to the model. So you don't necessarily need to do this yet because you don't know what half of these are. But I want you to know that when you start working on these new ideas and you add new sections of your site, you wouldn't start by creating the migration. You'd probably start by creating the model, and then the model would create the migration as part of its logic. That's something to think about. Okay, so out of the box, and we're not going to keep this. If I were to say make model comment, notice that will create a new file within your comments directory, and you'll see it right here. And notice it extends model. It uses this trait called has factory. We're not quite ready to talk about that just yet, but you can leave it where it is with the understanding that you'll learn more in the future. Okay, let's do another one. And again, keep in mind, I'm not going to keep any of these. I'm going to delete them all at the end of the video. Let's do make model post, but this time I want to also create a migration. Notice I can add -m for short. So let's do that now. -m. And now it creates two files. It creates the model, but also a corresponding post table migration. Let's have a look at that. Post looks good. And then migrations, of course, go in the database folder. And I can see it right down here. So notice these generators give you a way to quickly and rapidly start constructing some of these new features, which is cool. So I could say a post consists of a title. It consists of a body, but a string is too short. That would max out at 255 characters of Varchar. Instead, we're going to use text because it could be a very, very long blog post, and we want to allow for that. So yeah, you're starting to get comfortable, right? We are generating models. We've learned about options to also generate corresponding migrations. You learned in the last episode, you can run PHP artisan migrate to commit that migration. So that is now relevant and visible within your database. So you're making really good progress here. I hope you're excited. And yeah, this is all just so incredibly useful and powerful. I can't stress it enough. This is the bedrock of so much of the Laravel code you will write, even 20 years from now. Okay, so your homework is, work on it. Get this into your fingertips. Play around. You can delete it all when you're done. Generate a variety of models. Practice also generating the migrations as part of those models. And then fill out the migration. And then run PHP Artisan Migrate to see it in the database. And then start writing queries using PHP Artisan Tinker to fetch items from that database. And then see if you can manipulate an item or delete it or add a new one. That's your job. Play around and get these keystrokes under your fingertips. All right, I'll see you in day 10. Is that right? Yes, tomorrow is.
Alrighty. So that's the end of that lesson. So let me catch up with chat here. Yeah, okay. Matthias asks, are we deleting it completely in that case, i.e. making space in memory? Yeah, so what I just did there when I ran that delete statement and when we run that delete, wherever we're running it, essentially, it is literally not just deleting it locally, it's deleting it from our database. So it is deleting it from the source. So yeah, it's making space in memory. That record is gone. And so whenever you run a delete, you want to be darn sure that it's something that needs to be deleted. So yeah, running deletes, you got to be very careful. he's playing pretty fast and loose with the deletes there, but delete is one of those kind of commands you got to be really sure about. And especially you want to make sure that you have the right filters on any delete commands that you run. So delete, you always want to have a where clause on a delete. You always want to make sure you're saying delete from job listings where, particularly, ideally, you would only want to delete one record at a time. But if you have to do a mass delete for any reason, you would want to, generally what I like to do is I like to run a select statement first. So I run a read-only query first with that same filter. So if I want to say delete from customers table where status equals inactive, right? We have a bunch of inactive customers. We want to get them out of our customers table. We don't want them anymore. We don't care about them anymore. So then the first thing I would do is I would run a select statement that would say select star from customers where status equal inactive. So I could get my record counts. I could make sure that my query is behaving as expected. My filters are behaving as expected. And then after I've confirmed the record counts, I know how many records are going to be deleted. It's doing what I want. Then I would say delete from customers where status equals inactive. And I would verify that those counts are correct. Matthias says, I know often space doesn't matter, but good to be aware. Well, yeah, oftentimes space doesn't matter in terms of databases, but it can. And if you have bad data being written, if you have bad data being written to your database, if you have junk data in your database and you want to get rid of it, then yeah, it absolutely does matter. And also too, speaking of memory and queries and stuff like that, if you have a bunch of useless data that's making a table huge, if you have a table of 1 million rows and 750,000 records out of that million, so 3/4 of the records are garbage data for whatever reason, who knows, that's going to slow your queries down. If you have a complex query that you're trying to run against, the more records it has to look through, the longer that query is going to take. And so in that case, yeah, you would want to purge those records because it's going to make your queries take too long. And you're gonna have a noticeable decrease in performance because you're gonna have queries running for seconds longer than they should, which again, at scale, seconds matter, right? Matthias says inactive equals didn't have anything happen in a while. Yeah, and just in a theoretical sense, right? I'm just giving a theoretical example of why you might want to purge records. A lot of the times that's actually not true. We'll keep inactive records forever. But it can make a difference. For example, at my work, customers often want to keep everything forever, right? Customers love their data and they never want to get rid of anything ever. They are data hoarders, 100%. And so we often have to negotiate with them because if they're writing millions of records per day and they never want to get rid of anything, we're like, okay, yeah, that's great. But this data task is taking like 10 minutes when it should take 30 seconds or 10 seconds because you have so much data and it just can't read it quickly enough. So what we generally say instead is, okay, that's fine. You can keep all of your data from the last 5 years, right? Anything older than 5 years, you're not using it. You don't care about it. You think you care about it, but you really don't. We're going to get rid of anything that is, 5 years older than 5 years. And we can then drop those records. Peak says, we need to get my DBA to watch your streams. We have so much trash test data in our database. Hey, no database is perfect, right? We've got a lot of trash test data in our database too, but you got to have that balance between performance and space. And sometimes you just got to take the time to go and curate your data a little bit. Yeah. But yeah, like I say, a lot of the times people just want to keep everything. People don't want to get rid of data. And so you got to have that negotiation. You got to have that conversation to say, look, I see where you're coming from, but realistically, how much of this are you using? And oftentimes they can be swayed when you say, like, if you still want us to, deliver you your data in a timely manner, we have to get rid of some of this stuff because if we don't, we're going to have to load every other day. It's going to take a full day to load the data and you won't have it until 2 days from now, versus every night. Matthias says Amazon loves you having a lot of useless data. Yeah. I'm actually guilty of wanting to keep everything. I may need it someday. And that's a lot of the times that's what our customers, that's the impression that our customers have is, oh, but what if? What if I need this? I want to, the most common thing that I hear when I'm talking to a customer, building out, like a customer has a new data source, right? Let's say that the dining court has set up a new like payment system, right? And students can pay with credit card or their Apple Watch or whatever. And this payment system just automatically collects a bunch of statistics like student name, payment method, transaction amount, card number, time of day, reason for purchase, etc. All this stuff. And the customer, oftentimes their default is just saying, I want everything. Just store everything in the database. I want all of it. And oftentimes that's not realistic. If this payment system is collecting 200 different fields for every single transaction, that's going to be a big ass table, right? Or it's going to require a lot of database architecture to break it up into multiple tables. And so the question often then becomes, okay, you say you want everything, but let's go through each of these fields individually and you tell us how you're going to use each of these fields. Because if you can't give us a use case, we're not going to keep it. We're not going to keep that data. We'll keep 10 out of those 200 fields, right? So that's the conversation we got to have with the customer. And that's important for you when you're building your apps, like even when you're building little personal apps. Think about what data you're collecting. Is it necessary? How are you going to use it? And that'll get you, if you design your database smartly from the beginning, if you're smart about your database design from the beginning, then you're going to have a much easier time with every improvement you want to make to your app going forward. If you just kind of throw it together as an afterthought, then you're going to have a bad time. Matthias says multiple tables just being a huge ass table sliced down. Yeah, essentially. Yep. But the reason we do that, the reason we might slice a one big table into multiple smaller tables is that because then you can be smarter about how many records are in each table. So if you can identify which records are the truly unique records, which columns are truly unique values in each record, and then which columns are just the same few, like the same 3 values repeated over and over again, right? Let's say payment method is credit card, cash, or Apple Watch. And it's just every record just has those same 3 values just repeated, depending on the payment method. Well, I don't need to capture that every single time. I can do a lookup against an external dictionary table that just has 3 records in it and look up the appropriate record each time. So that's database design in a nutshell for you. Yep. And again, at scale, that matters. Having an integer lookup versus having to write a string out every time, that is going to matter. Yeah. Okay, folks, let's take another break. And then when we come back, I think we're going to wrap it up here. I don't think we're going to have time to get through another whole lesson. But then that'll give us a good 30 minutes here at the end. I want to answer the question that was asked earlier, which was really great, by Free. They asked about public speaking. So I do want to answer their question. I don't know if they're still here. Hey, Free, I don't know if you're still here. But I do want to answer your question. And so we'll talk about that when we come back. So 5 minutes. And yeah, we'll come back, answer Free's question. And then we're going to kind of just have our usual, end of session kind of, free for all, talk about whatever for 30 minutes, and then we'll wrap it up. All right, cool. I'll see you back here in 5 minutes. Alrighty, folks, we got about a minute left in the break, so come on back if you're coming back. And as always, please pet your dogs, pet your cats, pet your significant others with their permission, of course, and then come on back. Alrighty, welcome back, folks. And as I mentioned before, we're kind of done with the regular content for today, but I like, at the end of my streams, I always like to have a little free-for-all discussion at the end where we can just talk about whatever we like. And there was a really excellent question by Free, and they asked, let's see, do you have tips for public speaking? I see you speak fluently in front of around 600 users on Discord, which is dope. If I were you, I'd stutter a lot. I know it's off topic question. Sorry. No, you're totally fine. Yeah. So tips for public speaking. It's kind of a complicated question, but I will say that for me, and everybody's going to be slightly different, right? In how they get comfortable, how they feel. I will say that for me personally, and just to give a sense of who I am when I'm not on stream, right? Because you know the stream persona. You know me when I'm on stream, when I'm live. But me when I'm not on stream, I actually hardly talk at all. I'm a very introverted person, and just who I choose to be. That's how I've always been. I grew up in a very rural area. I didn't really have any I didn't have friends when I grew up, but not because I didn't want to, just because I lived in such a rural area that there was nobody my age who lived anywhere near me. So my friends were mostly animals. And I was fine with that. I still love animals, but animals can't talk. So I mostly just grew up as an only child in a very rural area. Me, my parents, and a bunch of animals on a big farm kind of a place out in the middle of nowhere. And so I was actually very socially awkward for a very long time. I found it difficult to make friends in school. People liked me because I was nice, but I was also very shy. I just didn't really talk to people just because I hadn't cultivated those skills, right? And so I didn't really start to cultivate those skills until I was in college. But one thing that I did learn while I was still in high school is that I didn't like necessarily speaking with people, but I did like performing. I performed in all the school talent shows. I performed in the school plays and the school musicals. I sang in the choir. And it took me a while to realize what the difference was, right? What's the difference between me walking up in front of a bunch of people and giving a speech versus maybe singing in a choir or acting in a play? Well, the difference is that in a play or in a choir, it is very definitively a performance, right? You are entering into an alternative world of some kind, right? You're going into a song, you're going into a play where there is a plot, there are rules, there is a kind of a set formula for how things go, and it's kind of a kind of a state of disbelief, right? The audience is suspending their disbelief. They know the play isn't real, but they're still going to enjoy it anyway. They're still going to feel it. And you as the performer, you're still going to enjoy this kind of alternate reality that you step into as well, right? It's not real, but gosh darn it if you aren't going to act your butt off. And so, yeah, and kind of Matthias is kind of echoing that there. How you can get better at public speaking is if you can learn to distance who you are, your real self, away from your public speaking persona self, right? You can kind of put up a wall between all of your anxieties and all of your, personal preferences, and then kind of become someone else when you go on stage or when you get up in front of people. And I'm not saying that I'm lying to you. It's more of I have a certain way that I act, a certain way that I speak when I'm on stream that's different than the way that I speak in front of people. I kind of almost call it like my newscaster persona. Like I come up here and I have a certain way that I enunciate things better. There's certain things, that I say and don't say when I'm on stream, or, I'm very conscious of like my face and my body movements. And that can be cultivated then just through practice, right? Because once you can kind of distance your emotions from your actions when you're up in front of people, once you can remove that emotional component by kind of putting on your mask, putting on your persona that you get up on stage, then you can cultivate that persona separate from your private self. You can just get in front of a mirror and you can practice the way you speak. You can meet up with friends and you can run your speech with them without feeling embarrassed. And yeah, it's just a different facet of you, as Matthias said. Each of us is a gem, right? Each of us is a unique and complex individual. And so you can choose to, gems all have facets, right? A diamond has facets. A diamond has faces. And you can choose which facet you turn towards the light, which facet is going to be reflecting the light in which situation. It's not a lie, it's not a false, representation of yourself. It's just a different facet of that gem, of that complex person who you are. And so, yeah, once you can kind of see public speaking or see those types of, like, even something as simple as a networking event, once you can see that as a performance, to some degree, because it is, right? You're putting on a version of yourself for other people. Once you can see that as a performance, then you can rehearse that performance, you can cultivate that persona, and you can, yeah, take some of the emotion out of it. Now, that's not to say that I don't get nervous going into a public speaking situation. Heck, I used to get nervous before I would come on stream. I would be like, sweaty hands, pounding heart, the whole 9 yards, right? I would be so nervous. I would be sweaty and pounding heart. But then the cool part is that then once I would get on stream and start talking and you start to get into that persona, into that flow state, then I didn't feel nervous anymore. And now I don't even feel nervous when I go on stream. And so the other part of that is sometimes just pushing through that initial anxiety. And that's the hard part to say, right? Nobody likes to hear that. Sometimes you just got to do it, even if you're scared, even if you're nervous, even if you think you're going to stutter. Because the best way, I think my favorite quote of all time, and I've said this before on stream, I think my favorite quote of all time is by Jake the dog from Adventure Time. And he says, cartoon show Adventure Time. He says, dude, the first step to, let's see, I gotta get this right. Hang on, I'm gonna Google the quote. I gotta get it right. Oh yeah, it's dude, sucking at something is the first step to being kind of good at something, right? Sucking at something is the first step to being kind of good at something. And so as you're cultivating that persona, you do have to practice, right? You can't just rehearse in front of the mirror the whole time. Sometimes you do just got to put yourself out there, go live on stream, see what works and what doesn't, see what people like about you, see what people like about this version of you, right? Because it's not you, it's a persona. So that's helpful in that if people say, oh, I don't like the way that you did this, or, oh, that was weird, that's fine, because that's not you. That's your public speaking persona. And then you can just, change that about that persona without having to modify anything about you as a person. It doesn't have to reflect on you. It just reflects on that facet of you that you can choose to modify or not modify as much as you want. Yeah, exactly. And Matthias has done a great job of that, of hosting the social anxiety group on the 100 Devs Discord. As they said, they're nervous every time they host a social anxiety meetup. You do it anyway because you know it's important. Yeah, and you have that external motivator that drives you to want to do that, even though your body is sort of viscerally saying, I don't want to, right? Oh yeah, there was a bit more context that you missed leading up to that. I was just saying that was a phrase that probably one of my favorite quotes, but we were talking about it in the larger context of feeling more comfortable with public speaking, and in the context of cultivating a persona to where that persona, you can put on that persona when you go into something like a public speech, or like a stream or like a performance on stage, whatever it is, something that is making you nervous, well, you can go into this sort of time boxed, rule bound scenario with a specific persona that you build for that scenario. And so, yeah, you might not be great at it when you start, but that doesn't reflect on you as a person. That just reflects on that persona, and you can improve that persona as you go. Yeah. And so, yeah, you might not be great at it the first time. You might get nervous the first time. That's okay. You can just keep working on it. And I think another thing that is difficult about social media, and I'm very conscious of this too, is the version of like myself that you all see and the version of anybody on social media, right? Anybody that puts themselves out there. The fact that I have cultivated this persona means that you are seeing the very best of me, right? You are seeing the this practiced sort of rehearsed version of myself. And so if you're looking from the outside in, you might be like, oh, wow, she's really good at public speaking, or how does she not get nervous, going up in front of a bunch of people? Who says I don't, right? But you don't see that because it's not on video. It's not on, on those Discord chats that I do, hosting stuff on Discord in front of hundreds of people. Yeah, I mean, I do get nervous, but you didn't see that. But it's because I'm in my persona when I'm on stage. And so it can often give people a false sense of, well, they're just good at that and I'm not. And the answer, and that makes me sad because I feel like anybody could get good at this stuff if they chose to practice it and if they really saw that, yeah, people do get nervous. People do stumble and it's just not something you always see. Oh, hey, Free, you're back. We were just talking about your question. We were just talking about your question. How much did you hear? I'm happy to go over the abridged answer again. Did you just come back? Because yeah, Free answered this question, or sorry, asked this question, and oh no, yeah, no worries, Free. Yeah, and so I would say that's part of it, Grot, is that you can learn how to handle screw ups gracefully, right? Um, but some of it you do, tend to things will go smoother the more that you practice. And but yeah, something can always go wrong, right? No matter how much you practice something or no matter how much you work at a skill, something can go wrong. But then yeah, how you handle it is going to improve the more you encounter that problem, right? Take, for example, on my streams here. In the early days, my method of preparation was I would rehearse everything to the point where I had encountered pretty much what I thought was every possible error. I would go through all the material beforehand. I would build the entire project. I would prep. I would, do all the error handling ahead of time so that I would, make it as smooth of a process as possible, right? No errors. We're just going to get it done. If any of the people watching have an error, I'll already know how to handle it. And it was a lot of work. And it wasn't wasted work, right? Because it made the streams go smoothly. But over time, I've gotten more comfortable with maybe not exploring every possible error state and, helping people troubleshoot while we're live, because that's a good skill to have. If you can walk somebody through an error, work on it together with chat, then that's a good skill to work on too, right? Good troubleshooting. So I do a lot less of that excessive preparation now, and it's more of just like, hey, if we get an error, it's okay. We'll figure it out. Yeah. Grat says, every time I make a class or a struct, I forget the semicolon at the end. Hey, I do the same thing in SQL. I'm not getting better at remembering the semicolons. I'm getting faster at fixing it when the compiler spits out stupid, unexpected token messages. Yep. Yep. Yeah, and again, that's practice, right? Practice is going to help in most of these situations. Yep. So if I had to this is a very long, kind of answer, but if I had to boil it down into two components, I would say the first one is if you can kind of learn how to put on a persona when you do have to do public speaking, if you can distance the real you from the person that's up there speaking to the point where you can kind of remove yourself from the nervousness and work on specifically the version of you that's going to go up there and speak. I call it my newscaster persona. When I come up here on stream, this is not the same me that's just lazing around at home on a Saturday. If you can kind of cultivate that public speaking persona, that'll help you distance yourself from your emotions, and it'll also help you deal with criticism. If people do give you suggestions, you're not going to take it personally, because that's the version of you that's doing public speaking. You can work on that separately. That doesn't affect you as you, the human. So that's the first part. And then the second part is practice. As trite as that sounds, practice is going to help you figure out what works for you, what doesn't, what specifically makes you nervous, what are the types of things you're going to encounter in those situations. So if public speaking makes you nervous, sign up for a club where you're going to have to do some public speaking, because you gotta, it's exposure therapy to some degree. And it's even better if you can do it in an environment like a club, like a public speaking club. If you can do it in an environment that is geared toward helping you get better at that thing. Oh, Matthias, thank you. Yeah, no, I would love to have joined one of those meetups again. Free says, Leon has invited me before, like a year ago. Oh, that's awesome. I was super nervous and I asked him a completely different question from what I wanted to ask. Okay, so let me ask you this. When you asked him a completely different question from what you wanted to ask, what happened? What happened when you asked the different question than what you wanted to ask? Did the world explode? Did, did everyone, buildings crumble? No, yeah, nothing happened. No one booed you. No, it was fine. And I think some of that, that's anxiety, right? Anxiety blows things out of proportion for us. It makes us assume, it's our lizard brain assuming the worst case scenario, right? But in your case, the worst thing that happened is maybe you didn't quite get the information you were looking for. That was it. Yeah, and as you said, I just felt like I'm under pressure. Everyone could be like boring, but they were chill. Yeah, nobody cared, right? It was fine. And who knows, maybe the question that you did end up asking, maybe somebody else out there in the audience wanted to ask that question. And so you gave them some information that they needed because you asked the question that you asked. So sometimes it can be helpful to actively reframe those scenarios in that kind of way. And this is a common exercise that therapists will give when you're dealing with anxiety. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a mental health professional. I don't pretend to be one. But I am just saying that if you can look back at that scenario and reframe it to say, like, here's what I thought would happen. I thought everyone would, say boring and be like, get off the stage. But what actually happened was, okay, you asked a question, it was answered, and then life went on. And awesome, great. And so what you could do maybe is try again. Maybe raise your hand again sometime and write down the question that you want to ask, have it on a piece of paper in front of you, write that question down so you don't forget it when you go up there. Raise your hand again, go up on stage and ask the question you really wanted to ask. And then you'll get the answer you wanted, and it'll be a similar experience to last time. So try reframing that scenario to be like, okay, here's what I thought would happen. Did that actually happen? No. What actually happened was very mundane and actually kind of positive, right? You got a question answered. You got to talk to Leon. Awesome. Now there's nothing stopping you from doing it again, writing down the question you really want to ask and reading it off that piece of paper when you get invited up there. So reframe it and then try again would be my advice, because that gets in that aspect of practice. Because now that here's the nice thing, now that you've done it once, you know how it works. You know how the process works. You know what it's going to be like when Leon calls you up. You know how the Discord stage is going to work. You know that you've got your audio set up correct because he can hear you. So that takes the pressure off for the second time. Yeah, Grot says, here you go. The answer to the question you wanted to ask is 42. Yeah, that's the answer to everything. Life, the universe, and everything. But yeah, so I think you are free. I think you are well poised to go up on stage a second time and just ask that second question. Because now, since you've done it once, you know what to expect. And you know if you've done it once, you can do it again. You have the capability. So I hope you do. Yeah, I love that question. That was really great. Anybody have any other questions? Oh, and just another thing I will mention too, the more that you do this type of thing, the more that you do this type of public speaking or this type of, you know, um, getting up in front of people and just doing stuff, it doesn't really matter what it is. The more patterns you'll start to build in your brain in terms of how to speak and what to speak about. Um, So, yeah, I can speak, as you've seen, I can speak for hours pretty much nonstop, just pretty extemporaneously, right? I'm not reading from a script, I am just vibing. Um, and that's something that I've worked on, right? That's something I've cultivated. And, you know, it's something I've worked on. And so now my brain can kind of just spin stuff out as I go. Because I've built those patterns and those pathways in my brain over the past 3 years. So, yeah, again, practice will make you better at this. Free says, actually, some people wanted this opportunity so bad to ask a question to Leon, and I'm very grateful to talk to him. Absolutely. Yeah, that was a wonderful experience, right? Tons of people like to raise their hands, and you got to talk to him. So there's nothing that's going to stop you from talking to him again. So I would say try it again. Write your question down, raise your hand again, and you might get called up again. There's people that have been called up on stage dozens of times, right? So you shouldn't feel bad about raising your hand again. There are people that have literally been up on stage dozens of times, um, and that's not because they're any better than anybody else. It's just because they just keep trying and they come up again and again and again. Yeah. So you are just as worthy as anybody else to go up on stage and ask your question that you want to ask. Yeah, and Matthias is also a great resource. They are on the Discord, so they're on the Discord way more than I am. So and also they're more likely to respond to messages than I am. So yeah, send if you have a question about or concerns about how to get up on stage. Yeah, awesome. I love that attitude, Free. You're gonna do great. You're gonna do great. Yeah, if you have questions about anxiety or that type of thing, feel free to ask Matthias. All right. Any other questions, folks? I'm always happy to chat about whatever here at the end of these streams. Oh, hey, Tropicana. They say, hi, I'm trying to learn SQL. Awesome. And I follow tutorials from YouTube, but I can't seem to set up the environment for my SQL. I'm thinking it's because I have Mac OS. Does it only run on Windows? I don't know the answer to that because I am a Windows user myself. So are you trying to specifically learn MySQL? Do you have a specific use case where you're specifically trying to learn MySQL? The only reason I say that is just because I feel like maybe Postgres might be easier to start with, because I feel like it plays better with multiple systems. You just want to learn. Okay, awesome. Hey, a data analyst. That's so cool, Tropic. I started out as a data analyst and now I'm a data engineer. So yeah, that was where I started my career, was in data analytics. Yeah. I don't know if MySQL works on Mac, but one thing that you could do is you could try an alternative environment. You could try a browser-based environment. I would recommend I would recommend Supabase. So let me just show you what that is because it's in your browser. So you can use it on a Mac, you can use it on a potato, whatever, Steam Deck, I don't care. It uses Postgres, which is just another flavor of SQL, right? So MySQL is a flavor of SQL, Postgres is a flavor of SQL. The nice thing about Postgres is it is open source, and it's used in just everywhere, right? So tons of different tools work well with Postgres. So you could use a browser-based tool like Supabase, which gives you, I'll just show you here. It gives you just a browser-based database. So here's an example of a database that I have. And I can write SQL directly in the browser. I don't need to install anything. And I can build out tables. I've got a bunch of tables here, a couple of views. I didn't need to install anything. It's just all in my browser, and it'll just work on whatever machine you have. It is. It's on the website. Yeah. So if we look here, this is a table, right? This is a table. It's got columns. It's got rows. I can, run queries against it. I can run this query right here. Ta-da. There we go. Results. Yeah, it's on. This is a free tool. But Supabase is a free way to host a database in the cloud on a website in the browser. Yeah. Toxic says so you can just connect to it using an API. Yep. It'll give you an API key. And so, Tropic for your use case, since it sounds like you're just trying to just learn the basics of SQL, right? You can absolutely, but you want to set up a database, you want to, learn how to make tables and that type of thing. You could absolutely use Supabase to do that. Supabase is nice because it has a SQL editor. So like you can write SQL directly, or it also has a GUI. So in this, this is one of my tables here. I don't have to, like, if I don't know how to do something in SQL, let's say I don't know how to, I don't know how to insert a record yet. I want to put a new record in this table. Yeah, just to practice. Sure. Let's say, you want to build out a table. You just want to practice. But you don't know how to insert a record with a SQL statement yet. You just don't have that. You're not there yet. You can use the GUI to do it. It'll just give you a little GUI pop up here, and you can just fill it out, like a form, if you don't know how to do it with a SQL statement yet. So it's nice because you can either choose to write a SQL statement, or you can use the GUI, or you can use a combination of both to do whatever you're trying to do. The outside is scary. Be careful. Yeah. Touching grass, man. Sometimes there's poison ivy in that grass, but it's a good idea to get outside. I like that. Got to make time for that. Yeah, of course, Tropic. Again, it is free. You don't have to pay for anything. And it should be more than enough, you should have more than enough options for practicing. Also too, Tropic, the Supabase has really great documentation. So if you go down, so on your homepage, you can go to guides, and it has really, really good documentation. So if we go to database here, if there's something you want to do, like a specific action you want to practice, like how do I do a join? How do I, I don't know, what are the different data types I can use? You can, look at the fundamentals here, and you can say, or working with your database here, you can say okay, how do I query, is there a SQL statement to do this sort of thing? Or you can use the search box up here and search for something specific, and the documentation is really good. So it'll help you with that stuff. And then also in terms of Tropic, in terms of SQL courses, another course I might recommend is SQL Bolt, SQL Bolt, which is free. And so I hope you're not paying for whatever resource you're using, because there's a bunch of free resources out there. W3 Schools has a free course. SQL Bolt has a free course. So hopefully that's helpful to you. Congrats on learning SQL. Toxic says, I had no idea it was a SQL database. I thought my only options were NoSQL like MongoDB. No, absolutely not. Yeah, if you want to build a full stack web app and host your database in the cloud, you have a myriad of options, both NoSQL and SQL. So you can choose to have a document-based database or a SQL database, both of them hosted in the cloud. You connect to them in very similar ways. So yeah, you can pick whichever type of database best fits your project. Yeah. Excellent questions, folks. Anything else we want to go over? Any other questions? And remember, there's no such thing as a silly question or a stupid question. Oh, yeah, the courses were W3 schools. Yeah, here, let me just pull them up. Give me 1 second. Yeah, let me just, I'll put the links in chat. Yeah. All right, so here's the first one. This is from W3 Schools. It's a SQL tutorial. It's free. And then the next one, and I'm not saying you have to do both of these. I'm just giving you some options here. And the next one is SQL bolts. There you go. So yeah, hopefully that's helpful to you, Tropic. Yeah, Grot, I would agree. Yeah, W3 Schools is really good. They even have like a little SQL sandbox that you can play around with like directly in the lessons, which is cool. Yeah, and O'Reilly is good if you like more traditional sort of written books. But those do cost money, so. Yeah, of course, Tropic. Congratulations. SQL is very good to know. But it was the first language I ever learned, so I'm pretty biased. Yes, and that's true. I will say I have done multiple streams on SQL. I actually have a SQL playlist on my YouTube channel. It's not very long, but if you want a quick crash course of the basics of SQL, and you like watching videos, I have done a few streams on the basics of SQL. So shameless plug for my YouTube channel. But I know that, hey, some people prefer to learn, and I would recommend, learning with a maybe a course like W3 Schools or SQL Bolt if you're really serious about getting into SQL. I'm not trying to, plug my YouTube channel. Yeah, if you're interested in like the written books on a particular language, especially the O'Reilly series, I would recommend getting them through digitally through the Humble Bundle, which is like a charity bundle. They oftentimes do bundles of books related to a particular language, like Python or SQL or I don't know, network programming or whatever. And the cool thing is that you can pay as much as you want. So you could pay like as little as $5 for like 6 books, and they're good books. They're O'Reilly books. They often show up in those humble bundles. Yep. Thank you for adding that link, Ben. So I'm signed up for the Humble Bundle like newsletter just so I can see what's in the latest bundle, and if there's a good one that's like related to my job, I'll just pay for the bundle, and then all the books are copyright free, so like I'll just download them. It's not like you have to get them through your library or anything. You just download them as like PDFs, and they're yours for cheap. Obviously, also check your local library if you're looking for resources to learn a particular language. Check your local library not only for books, but also for digital resources. Things like LinkedIn Learning or Udemy. Sometimes your local library will be subscribed to those courses, and if you have a library card, you can get access to those courses for free. So also check your local library and see what resources they offer for learning. Yeah, I said copyright free, but they're yours to use. You can download the books from the Humble Bundle, and they become yours. They aren't like a library thing. DRM free. That's what I meant. DRM free. Yep. Digital rights management free. Yeah, Humble Bundle is great. I've gotten so many awesome games through Humble Bundle. 100%. Leader says Postgres's docs are crazy. Postgres also recommends books that devs should read. They listed on their website. It's really good. Yeah. Shout out to the official Postgres docs as well. I'll pull those up. Yeah, that's another reason I do like Postgres a lot, because it is open source and it has great docs. And here we go. So I'll link the docs here. Yeah. So tons of free resources out there. The best thing that you can do is just not pay for any of this stuff. Learning, I don't know, it always just yanks my chain when learning materials are put behind a paywall, especially learning materials on the internet. Like, come on, man. Don't put learning materials behind a paywall on the internet. I can understand if you're, like colleges charging for a class because you're sitting in front of a professor. That professor is giving their time to teach the material. But like for just like stuff on the internet, don't charge for that. It should be free. So I always try to recommend free stuff whenever I can. That's why I give my time, right? Because learning should be free. Alrighty. Anything else? Awesome. You guys are killing it with the end of stream questions today. Just absolute bangers across the board. Yeah, and I was also going to suggest MariaDB if they weren't interested in Postgres, but it sounds like they don't really care about the flavor of SQL, just like kind of learning SQL in general. So, yeah. You have 70,000 points. Oh my gosh. Oh man. Well, hey, Matthias, if you shoot me a message on Discord, do you want to have a coffee chat or do you want to set up somebody to have a coffee chat with me? Because we can work something out. Oh, thank you, leader. That was very sweet of you. MariaDB is default in Arch. Okay. Yeah, Postgres. Yeah, I mean, for personal learning, I would pretty much recommend Postgres across the board. Okay, yeah. If they're comfortable messaging me directly, they can. If you want to just, or you can be the intermediary. I don't care. Um, if you could just give me their name, if they're gonna message me themselves, just Matthias, just shoot me a message with their name so I can look out for their message. Because I get a lot of messages, so I cannot I can't respond to all of them. So if it's an important one that I need to look out for and respond to, I absolutely will. Because Oracle was being naughty. That is the probably the nicest way that anyone can ever describe Oracle is naughty. There are a lot of things. Oracle is man, Oracle's something else. And I say this as somebody I use Oracle every single day, um, for my work, but they are they are something. Oracle's gonna Oracle. You refer to them as stupid company for even yeah, man, they've I always like I think I ask probably once per year, like at my job, like, hey, are we gonna be moving off of Oracle anytime soon? Are we gonna get onto, I don't know, SQL Server or whatever at any point? Because we're paying like out the wazoo for a ridiculously expensive Oracle license. But I don't think that's gonna happen, unfortunately. Yeah. Postgres for the win. But yeah, Matthias, circling back to the coffee chat thing. Yeah, I'm definitely open to coffee chats. I need to update my Calendly, my public. So if I can get in touch with this person, I'll just send them a link to my Calendly. They can pick a time that works for them because I'll have it set up so that it works for me. And then yeah, we can chat. I did mention, kind of as we're wrapping up here at the end of the stream, I did want to mention my stream schedule for the next like 2 months is going to be real weird because I'm going to be doing a lot of traveling and a lot of family stuff over the next couple months. So there will be no stream next week. I will be streaming 2 weeks from now, and then I think no stream again the following week. And then I think there will probably be like two streams in June. And then I am going on a huge trip. I'll be leaving the country. I'm not telling you exactly when. Nobody needs to know that. But I I will be out of the country for a period of time in June. Doing something cool. Um, and so I'll be out of the country for a period of time in June. Then I will be back in July, and then I'll be uh, doing stuff again in August. So my stream schedule is going to be weird. Oh, of course, P. Wow, how did you get that cool highlight? That's awesome. Thank you, Peak. Great to have you here. Yeah, no problem, Matthias. Oh, it's a bit redemption. Neato. Cool. Um, but yeah, so my stream schedule is going to be weird. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the stream, what I'm going to be doing for, I think we're going to end this specific Laravel series here. Not because I don't want to do it, but because my stream schedule is going to be so sporadic that I actually want to finish this course. Like I want to finish 30 days to Laravel. And that's not going to work if it's going to take me another 6 months to do it. So I'm going to finish it on my own. I'm getting toward the end of it now. I'm going to finish it on my own. And then, for the kind of sporadic streams that I'll be doing for the next couple months, my goal is to make them like epic one shots. So by that, I mean, we're going to have a project of some kind, like whether it's, a full stack app or something else, like something that we're going to sit down and we're going to go through it from start to finish, and it's going to be self-contained. So in one single stream, we are going to go in, we're going to start from scratch, and we are going to build a thing. And at the end of that stream, that thing is going to work. It's going to work for me, and it's going to work for you. So I shouldn't say we're going to build a thing. You're going to build a thing. I'll have already built it. And so you'll come out of each of those streams with a working thing, with a working project or a website or whatever app. I don't know. So that'll be the goal. They'll be self-contained kind of one-shot streams through sometime in July or August. And then when I go back to like my regular weekly schedule, that's when we'll start like another probably extended series of some kind with multiple parts. So yeah, for the next couple months, if you tune into any of those streams, you're not going to miss anything because we're going to be doing a cool one shot. So that's the goal. And that'll be fun for me too, because that's more of kind of what I used to do, is just like sit down, slam out a project, and they'll probably be longer streams too. They'll be probably more marathon streams. But that doesn't mean that you have to stay for the whole stream. It's going to be, because they're all going to be recorded and they're going to go on my YouTube channel. So you can come back and watch them anytime, but they're probably going to be more like marathon kind of focused streams for those couple months. Oh, thank you, Matthias. Thank you, Lalo. But yeah, I don't know what they're going to be about yet, but they are going to be like one shot focused. Always marathon. I've been pretty conscious of that lately. I've been trying to limit my streams to 3.5 to 4 hours at maximum. But these will probably be longer, just given the nature of how those projects usually go. So yeah, and then when we come back in July or August, depending, when I come back to regular streaming July or August, I am planning on a pretty major revamp of my channel as well. I'm going to try to make a lot of improvements to like my UI here, to my just updates and improvements to my channel, to the things I offer to the folks, to the viewers and to subscribers and that type of thing. I'm going to try to do kind of a big overhaul, because I don't often pause long enough to actually do those types of things. I just don't, I stream on a pretty regular cadence, and I just don't have time to make those types of updates. So if I'm pausing for a while, I'll have the time to do that stuff. So that's the hope. Toby says, did you get your new desk yet? Yeah, so that's a great question. I took a sponsorship from what is it? Autonomous, which is like a standing desk company. I took a sponsorship from them. A pretty great sponsorship. They said, we're gonna give you like a $400 desk if you like our tweet and like engage with our content on Twitter. So I'm like, yeah, I'll do that. They didn't ask me to like host a stream about their desk or anything. So I was like, I'll do that, definitely. Because ergonomics are important, right? You got to be, if you're coding for a long time, or even if you're streaming for a long time, ergonomics are important. So you don't, end up with a bad back by the time you're 40. And so I picked out my desk. I got it ordered, but with this whole, with the whole general implosion of my country, there have been some delays with shipping, unfortunately. So I don't know when I'm going to get it. I have not got it yet. I'm still using my IKEA table and box of tax documents as a standing desk, so we'll see. Oh, Peak, you have one of their desks? That's awesome. I'm glad to hear that you like it. Had it for 7 years. Wow. Yeah, I mean they look like they're good quality and they're very reasonable. I mean, genuinely, this is not a bit. This is not me, being a sponsorship thing. Genuinely, they look like good quality desks for a very reasonable price. So I'm looking forward to getting mine. But yeah, everything's up in the air you know, with the United. So I live in the United States for context, and I'm sure you all know what's going on there. So there's a lot of things up in the air, which is partially why I'm doing so much traveling, and I'm doing so much stuff for me this summer, is because I feel like it's important to do that, because you never know what the future is going to be like. So that's why it's the summer of me this summer. Should be fun. Alrighty, anything else, folks? I love that. I may or may not be looking at America with quizzical squinty eyes. Hey, me too, except, I'm inside the fishbowl going like this, but I also have a similar expression on my face. Yeah, I'm slamming on the inside of the fishbowl with my fists. So funny story, my circus, yeah. My grandfather was actually from the UK. I love that. That's the perfect emoji, Laylo. Absolutely. There has never been a better use of a subscriber emoji. Yep, 100%. Um, yeah, so the funniest story, my grandfather is actually from the UK. And I was looking into, like, did my mom ever like claim her UK citizenship? Unfortunately, she didn't. She could have had like dual citizenship. I was like, did my mom claim her citizenship? So maybe I could get citizenship to the UK. Get the heck out of here. But nope, no dice. Because my mom never claimed her citizenship. So, but you would not believe some of my, Google histories in terms of where I can go. But yeah, let's bring out the pitchforks. Yeah. Well, unfortunately, the thing about the U.S. is we tend to pack more firepower than pitchforks, so it doesn't work quite as well as it might in other countries. You should come here. I would love to come to Sweden, man. Like, I love Europe. I do. I've been to the UK so many times. I've been to Germany and France and all these wonderful places and so many amazing people and culture and human rights. It's just great, man. I love Europe. I love the UK. Genuinely. And the rest of the world is so cool. I mean, honestly, yeah. The rest of the world is so cool, and I think that one of the biggest, America is such a huge place, right? The United States absolutely has a great deal of culture and wonderful natural beauty, but the thing about when you're such a huge country is that there's so many people who have never left it. Um, there's so many people who have never left the United States, and that is one of, I think, our biggest failings as a country, is we don't know how great the rest of the world is too. How, you know, there's so many cool people all around the world and so many cool cultures and so many things we can learn from those cultures. And we often discount other countries as being inferior to us when that's really not true. It's that American exceptionalism, manifest destiny, freedom, and exceptionalism, and all those things that, yeah, we overlook those other countries that could teach us things. Okay, because I'm a filthy American grot, like I got to translate the 21C into Fahrenheit. Hang on. I know that's again, another failing of the United States is that we don't use the metric system and we don't use Celsius. I can't do that conversion. Oh man, 69.8 degrees Fahrenheit? That's a great temperature. What are you talking about? It was in the news, literally news headline that was going to be 20, literally news headline. Are you saying that because it's so unremarkable? Because I was like, that's the perfect temperature. I mean, I would love to live in a place where a news headline is that it's going to be 70 degrees Fahrenheit versus where the news headline is whose civil rights are being cut today. I mean, honestly, it's the first time it's getting more. Hey, Grot, I tell you, you don't know which part of the U.S. I live in, but I actually live at a fairly similar latitude to the UK. So actually, that sounds about right. It's practically a heat wave. Nah. Now the UK actually has such the UK's weather is very mild. I every so here in the United States where I live, we have massive temperature swings. So in the winter, in the winter it gets down to well below 0 degrees Fahrenheit. Like and I say 0 degrees Fahrenheit because I know it's a very different translation to Celsius. 0 degrees Fahrenheit is even colder. And so it gets down to well below, it can get down to well below 0 degrees Fahrenheit or well below or well above 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So the temperature swings are huge. We have tornadoes. Like I would love the wonderful like mild rainy weather of the UK, just kind of all year round. It'd be great. It's beautiful there. Oh, I absolutely agree that Celsius is better than Fahrenheit. I was just raised on the Fahrenheit system, so I just don't have those mental models where I can just do the conversion. Peak, we're number one at putting people in prison. Honestly, yeah. The United States is very good about putting people in prison. Toxic. I hope that you get so even if you don't come here for like a job opportunity, I hope that you get the chance to visit in better political climate someday. In a day where you can feel safe coming here. I do hope you get the chance to visit because it is a beautiful country. And never let me never feel that I don't love the United States in terms of beauty. Because it has some incredible like geography. It has thousands and thousands of acres of state parks, of national parks that are just wild, beautiful wildland. Um, it has every single climate you could ever ask for. Everything from like tundra to swamp to almost jungle. It's incredible, um, and the distances are truly incredible too. Metric system is awesome, with the exception of temperature. Celsius. I love the temperature wars in the chat. Yeah, 100% toxic. I completely understand. I wouldn't be crossing the border if I was Canadian either. Totally feel you. Yeah, the states are huge, 100%. So, I think the thing that often shocks like Europeans the most is how long it can take to drive across a single state, like a single United States. Like many of our individual states are larger than European countries, um, which is pretty wild. And so yeah, travel time always takes when people come here from Europe. Travel time always takes so much longer than they think. Canada needs to build a wall to keep us out. Yeah. Uh, Honestly. But yeah, I'm gonna like I'm gonna Google something really quickly. I'm just curious. Um, let's see. Yeah, so the longest road in my state is so in my individual state, the longest road is 300 miles long. So you can drive 300 miles and you can stay on the same road the entire time. Like, one road, I'm sorry, you can stay in the same state the entire time. So one road, one state, 300 miles is the longest road. And it goes from the entire like northern part of my state all the way to the southern part, and it's 300 miles long. Oh, Grot, like, yes, I completely agree that Fahrenheit makes no sense as a temperature measurement. Uh, I wish my mental model was different, but it's not. I love it when we can have a like a petty debate over scales of measurement. That genuinely tickles me. So thank you all for doing that. That's great. Any other questions, folks? Anything else we want to talk about? Also, too, I'm just gonna put a plug out there. All y'all out there in Europe, if any of your countries are like willing to, take data engineers from the United States, like hit me up. I'm serious about that. Hit me up on Discord, whatever. Like send me a message here on Twitch. I am open to job opportunities. You know, not in the United States. So do hit me up. Layla says, "Are you catching the new season of The Last of Us?" Not yet. It is on my list. I have been hella busy. So I need to. I wanted to give that the time it deserves because I absolutely love the first season. Um, it was amazing, and I know the plot. I will tell you that, and I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Um, I already known about the games and everything, so like I mean I know the plot, but that didn't uh make me like that didn't make me enjoy the first season less. The fact that I already knew what was going to happen, that didn't make me enjoy it any less. It was still fantastic. So um yeah, I'm looking forward to sitting down and watching the second season and seeing how that plays out. Yeah, I did hear about that. I did hear about that. And I mean, like it kind of sucked that I was spoiled for it already and it was going to happen, but it was fun reading the reactions of people who didn't know what was going to happen. Um, and I'm sure it's still going to have the same level of it. For me, like I don't care if I get spoiled necessarily. Like I'm not one of those people that gets super mad or disappointed about spoilers. Like it's going to happen. I'm on the internet. I don't, I'm not going to get all uptight about it. So I tend to just enjoy things to the same extent whether I'm spoiled or not. No, we're not gonna talk about the thing that happened. I'm not gonna give any spoilers. I know there's probably other folks out there that haven't seen it either. So VPN for the win. Yeah, yeah. We're not gonna spoil anything. But because I mean, and yeah, I don't know the sequence of events or how anything happens. I have just have a general sense, and so um, I probably won't have the chance to actually sit down and watch the season until it's over, and then I'll just binge the whole thing in like 6 hours or however long it is. And there's so much great TV coming out right now. I mean, Severance just finished, but there's Doctor Who is airing right now. Black Mirror, man, I gotta catch up with Black Mirror. I gotta catch up with Last of Us. I'm so behind. Star Trek Strange New Worlds is coming back soon. Like, uh, why am I traveling so much when there's so much TV to watch? I gotta clear my schedule for the TV. Yeah, Andor is coming back. On the plane. Yeah, actually, honestly, yes. I will have a I will have a many hours long international flight coming up. That's literally going to be the longest flight I've ever taken. So I will have many hours to watch as many things as are available to me. But yes, that's a great suggestion, Layla, and that's probably what I will do. And and also too, I mean, there's a new season of Game Changer too. On so Dropout just come out with a new season of D&D and Game Changer. So it's just the content. It's just it never stops. Yeah, I do agree with that, Grot. Like they want you to buy every service, right? Yeah, I am subscribed to way too many streaming services right now. I think I want to cancel like 3 of them. Um, I'm probably gonna cancel Apple TV. Sorry, Apple. I was just in it. I was just in it for Severance, and now Severance is over. So I'm gonna cancel Apple TV. Probably gonna cancel Paramount once the new Star Trek season is over. Um, I don't have Netflix because it's too expensive. But yeah, probably gonna cancel Disney Plus. R matey, indeed. I am well. I am. The high seas are not unknown to me, as it were. Honestly, peak, yeah. Like I find my out of all the streaming services I subscribe to, the thing I watch the most is YouTube. Like I love like I just watch documentaries. A lot of um services will release like episodes of their shows onto YouTube. I just watch them there. Particularly like Dropout, I'll watch D&D there. Critical Role, I watch, some of their stuff there. Um and I subscribe to YouTube Premium, so I never get any ads and I can just listen to documentaries all day long while I'm working. Alrighty, folks, let's see about maybe finding someone to raid, shall we? Hey, you can't beat physical media, honestly. I mean, physical media is pretty great, I will say. I still have, a collection of DVDs and a few Blu-rays. I don't think I have a DVD player anymore, honestly. I think I have a PlayStation 4. Does PlayStation 4 play DVDs? Because I have a PlayStation 4 and a PlayStation 5. I know PlayStation 5 doesn't play DVDs, but does PlayStation 4 do DVDs? Actually, like I have all 7 seasons of Star Trek Voyager on DVD. All 7 seasons. Oh, you've lost, man, that makes me scared for my Star Trek Voyager collection. They had better quality? Okay. Cause yeah, that was like my first like as a kid, like buying the into all 7 seasons of Star Trek Voyager. That was like the first major purchase I ever made. It was like $400, and I worked for months to save that money. I was teaching piano. I was like scrimping and doing stuff after school just to save up the money to buy to buy Voyager on DVD. So that's one of my prized possessions, even though I can just watch them all on Paramount Plus. All right, let's see. Similar, smaller size, same category. What do we got here? Okay, so we're going to look for somebody. As always, if anybody has any suggestions about who we want to raid, feel free to shout them out. Otherwise, we're going to look for somebody that we can pass you all on to. Give them some encouragement. Ooh, we got a VTuber here. That might be fun. See what they're up to. I like VTubers. I think the effort they put into their avatars and the cool things they do. I think VTubers are fun. They look like they're building. What are they building? Hmm. They're building something. Might be fun. All right, let's check this person out. We're going to raid this person, see what they're working on. As always, please, give them the same respect that you would give me. Give them the same awesome vibes that you bring to my chat. And give them some encouragement with whatever they are building. Looks like something maybe exciting. I don't know. Alrighty, gonna go ahead and raid this person. And again, remember, I will not be around next weekend, but I will be 2 weekends from now. And we're probably gonna it's gonna be a one shot. This is gonna be our first one shot that we're gonna do in about 2 weeks. So we're gonna be building something cool from start to finish on stream, no matter how long it takes. So that should be super fun. And I look forward to seeing you all there. So raid time is starting now. Layers. All right. Raid starting in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Bye-bye.